Alright, let me just turn the music down a little bit. Let's see, we got 1 viewer, so I hope all your trick-or-treating has gone well. Thank you, Dr. Wilden. I hope you're hallowed like Eve be good too. Hallowed be thy win indeed. Alright, let me just call Emily here. Gigi might be joining us. Emily. Emily, Emily, why do we bother to stay? Why are you running away? I think M didn't see my ping. There you go. Welcome back to the world of the living. We are going to be reading a couple of creepypastas here. Let me get the list. First up is Dog in the Furnace, then it's Counting Song, and then we have a Reddit no sleep story that honestly is pretty creepypasta like worthy, which is called Because You Are My Baby. And then last, and we're hoping Gigi will be able to join us for the last one. The last one is going to be Pen Pal. Emily, are you excited? Because I'm excited. Yeah, Emily is just a little quiet because it is late for Emily, so Emily might not have as much gusto as me, because we wanted to do this earlier, but we really wanted Gigi to attend. So we're hoping like Gigi can like drive home safe. I know it's like raining in like some parts of like the good old United of SA. So yeah, like we'll just hope like Gigi gets home safe, and like as Gigi like is going through some storms like right now, like in her personal life. So like Gigi really needs this, and even Gigi can't attend. I hope like Gigi can like listen to the VOD and everything. So let. Yeah, it seems like it always rains on Halloween. It's a 50-50, like over 50-50 chance. There we go. I got the page pulled up. Do you want to start? Oh yeah, I forgot. I gotta put on some music for this. One moment. Let me find some.
Dog in the Furnace was your one.
Oh yeah, it is mine. Hold on. I will do that. Just uno momento, por favor. As Kit Ricker would say. Yes, Kit, I am a good dog. Oh yeah, Muji was the person that did all the creepypasta music. Yeah, Mew. I guess he goes by Mew now. There we go. Let's see her. No, there we go. Ah, yeah, Living in the Dark. This is a classic one. Oh, sorry. What, you were saying something, man?
I'm gonna rib Kid a little bit. Be like, shout out to Kid for like not giving us even a full fucking 24 hours notice to plan this thing and get it ready. we really fucking do. You're lucky that we worked that fast.
Yeah, like Kid is very lucky that we ladies are master of improvisation. Like, it took me like so long to get this makeup on and to like make sure like the bullet holes in my vest were like, you know, not like showing up like too badly. Gotta make sure my armor is properly scuffed for Halloween. And I am not in my costume. I should have gotten my costume stills, but oh well. You guys are gonna deal with me in my fucking uniform because I had to go on duty for this shit. Alright, I am going to open voice mod before I forget. So just give me a sec, because I want to do some specialty shit for this stream, since it was such on the fly. Might just take me a little longer than I thought, because it wanted me to log in, the bastard. Even though I've already logged in before. How dare it. How dare it make me log in. Alrighty, Dighty. Come on. Why aren't you doing it, huh? Okay, it's being a bit of a bastard. Let me fucking just do this real quick. There we go, now it's operational. Sorry if you can hear my weird ass fucking voice. Let me just go to clean audio real quick. There we go. So now it should be doing my normal voice and it should be drowning out any background noise. Yeah, I know you wanted me to dress up as Cosmo from the Guardians, like of the galaxy, but guess what? You don't get it. You don't get it, do you? Oh, what the hell? Why did my audio crap out? Hold on. Technical differences again. There we go. Is it working now? Why can't I hear anything? Oh, good God. Alright, okay, I'm forfeiting voice mod for this stream because I was not prepared for this shit, and it broke everything. Alright, so yeah. Damn, man. It really sucks, though. But yeah, now that that's exited.
Which one?
There we go. Well, welcome in, Soka. Yeah, we just went live, like, not like 10 minutes ago. Like, we did the intro and everything, and, like, I apologize if I'm echoey. I don't know why I'm echoey. It might be Emily that's slightly echoey, but it shouldn't be detrimental. I turned off voice mod, so it shouldn't break shit now. But I'm gonna get right into the creepypasta, because I've been, like, making you guys get on the edge of your fucking seats for this crap, so... One moment. I also forgot I had a video. Excuse me, video on my phone. Don't worry, I'll timestamp so that way people can get right into the story in the comment section, because I've been fucking taking so long.
It's okay, just like, if we're, I'm just hoping that if I'm agree doesn't fucking
I mean, you sound fine on my end. Alright.
It was the, okay, so it was the voice mod.
That's fucking sucks. Alright, well, either or, like, we fixed it now. I can't take full credit for this story. It was related to me by my grandfather on my dad's side. This was at an early age, and suffice to say it had quite an effect on me. For years, I was more afraid of fire than you'd normally expect. To this day, I won't go near a furnace. Have you ever seen one of those creepy Eastern European grandmas in a horror movie or in television? The over-the-top character with a thick accent and strange demeanor, played for laughs or horror. Yeah, Grandma was the living, breathing embodiment of that treasured cliche. She was the type to give you stale candies and an icebox and icebox flavored cakes while my parents were around. Then, when I was left alone in her care, the niceties came to a sudden halt. Her old cottage was more of a relic than she was, and if it weren't for the constant fear of getting on her bad side, the house would have scared me more than anything. It sighed and whined when the winds kicked up, the pipes occasionally banged like frantic Morse code, and a horrible rotten egg smell always came up through the heating vents when the heat was working at all, that is. When I was little, I knew nothing of the world. I was, "You little stupid ass." After a bit of schooling and life lessons learned, I was, "You little wise ass." I suppose I was at that age when you feel like you're starting to figure the world out. When she decided to prove that wasn't true. "Come, sit down here," Grandma snapped, lightly kicking the ottoman towards me. I'd been telling her all about what I learned in science class that day, something about germs or viruses and how they'd someday become immune to antibiotics. I'm sure I was probably rambling, at least in her estimation. I sat where I was told. Disobeying Grandma, especially out of sight of my parents, was not a good idea. "Let me tell you something about science. It is a bunch of men dressing in funny coats, looking very close at very small things. So close, they look that they think that this is all there is. Just tiny specks." Grandma adjusted her shawl and pointed a crooked, yellow-nailed finger in my face. "Not everything that exists is made from their tiny dust." Later on in life, I'd learned through other family members that Grandma took a dim view towards science in general. It was related to the Nazis, their experiments, but try as I might, no one seemed to have the full story. If I had known the question, I could have asked her directly when she was still around. "Let me tell your story," Grandma said, leaning back once again if she were about to nod off. "I will swear to you that it is true. Then we will see what you think of your classes and textbooks." As she spoke, my mind was on other things. Kid stuff. I wanted to go outside and play, or to just watch cartoons. I didn't want another lecture from the old woman, and I was sure this would be no different than her other boring stories about respecting elders and being happy to have a pot to piss in. Or rather, a pot for the piss, as she'd put it. Once she got into it, however, the tale had my full attention. As she told it, her father, my great-grandfather, was a gambler and a drunk. Her words, not mine. He had become notorious throughout their small town in the old world. That part of the reason he moved his family here when she was a little girl. She didn't really know much about her dad, other than the cruel rumors and taunting that followed her wherever she'd go. He was apparently the sort of fellow who spent little time at home with the family during the day and would stumble home half dead after midnight. Grandma spoke of one night in particular when her father came home even later than usual. There was a scuffle outside which drew Grandma and Great-Grandma from their beds. There came a loud groan from the back stairs. Looking out a window, the two women saw Great-Granddad struggling with a stranger. The stranger wore black, tattered clothing, spattered with crimson, and his skin seemed dark as night. The stranger seemed to be trying to break into the house, and whether he was being protective or he was just drunk enough to want to fight, Great-Granddad grappled with the stranger and eventually got the better of him. A few sharp blows with a stone, and the stranger was no longer a threat. The family buried the body and never spoke of it again, save for one fleeting moment years later when Great-Grandma told their daughter it had been Satan himself come to ravage them. This is around the point where I actually started fully listening, by the way. Other than that brief bout of heroism, the only thing the old man did for his wife and child would be an occasional trip to the cellar in order to stoke the furnace. Even then, it was probably more for his own comfort than theirs. It was in that cellar that Great-Granddad finally saw his luck turn around. "Ah, my friend," called a voice in the dim light of the furnace. "It has taken me a long time to find you." The man slowly approached the source of the friendly words. The furnace. "Please, I ask you to open this door that we might have the words," chuckled the voice. He swung the furnace door open quickly, retracting his hand from the heat and whatever strange spirit might be within. "I want no trouble," the man warned. "My family sleeps, and so shall I, if you allow me to depart." "How can you say such a thing?" The voice came again, almost tauntingly pleasant. "I am a gracious guest in your home. I can do you no harm." Great-Granddad looked into the heat of the furnace through the flames and fixed his gaze on a pair of dark eyes just beyond. Soon the eyes came forward and a face was revealed. It was a black dog. Black as the coal it resided in, the large, wild look at the beast made it impossible to tell what breed it could have been, if it was any specific breed at all. "A dog!" the man shouted before covering his mouth in horror. A dog! In the furnace!" he repeated quietly. "The best friend to a man," the dog nodded. "Devil!" the man whispered. "Demon! Hell's child! I bid you to leave in the name of our Lord God!" The dog laughed, even though it came across as more of a choking bark. "My friend, please. I am not this devil of which you speak. I am just a messenger. Come with good news. You are chosen for a great reward." "A reward from the likes of you?" "Please, what is wrong with me? I would be interested to know." You are an unkind thing. You are unnatural, an abomination. In this, we are truly brothers." The burning hound seemed to think this as a reasonable response, though the man didn't see it the same way. With his face turned to the creature, Great-Granddad backed towards the cellar steps. "I will have no more of this. I will bring a bucket of water, and that will be the end of you." The dog spat fire at the men, or at least that is how it appeared in the moment. What at first seemed to be a tiny, white-hot ball of flame quickly cooled into a glittering hue and clattered to the stone floor. It was a silver coin. Great-Granddad stopped. The coin nestled between his shoes as it cooled. "What sort of trick is this?" he asked, staring down in confusion. "It is no trick. It is your reward," the dog answered. With that vague explanation out of the way, the dog heaved sickly. A small pile of silver coins rolled from its pointed snout and came to rest on the burning coals before him. "Here." "What?" "Here. These are for you. You have fallen on hard times through no fault of your own. A man cannot be blamed for a few bad wagers, eh?" Wary, yet intrigued, the man slowly approached the furnace once more. After a prolonged silence, The pale-faced, sweating man spoke. So let me have them. The dog laughed again. You must take them. Scoop your payment from the flames and you may keep it all. Consider this proof of your courage. The man worked the sleeve of his long johns over his hand and made a quick, half-hearted, grasping motion towards the coins. He was concerned not only about the flames, but also the toothy jaws within. I'm sure you can do better than that. The dog shook his head. Look! You have not a single coin! With a deep breath and a furrowing of the brow, Great-Granddad made a final swoop with his hand, gathering coins and coals alike before dropping them quickly to the floor. Ah! That is a good man! The dog cheered. Great-Granddad let out a shriek and blew on his hand. He'd been burned, but not enough to make it permanent. As soon as the pain gave way to numbness and itching, the man was on his knees, counting the spoils of his latest gamble. He wasn't wealthy now, but the amount was enough to take care of all the debts he'd managed to rack up in the time since he'd left his older debts behind. There's enough here to pay off everyone! He grinned, but only briefly. Oh, there will be nothing left afterward. Oh, the dog tilted its head. That is quite an odd coincidence. With that, the dog receded back into the flames and disappeared. Great-Granddad closed the furnace once more and hid the coins when they were cool to the touch. In the following days, he settled a few debts. However, some were left unpaid. It stood to reason, at least in his mind, that if he reinvested some of his unexpected windfall, there might be then a profit that could be kept. Unfortunately, this was not meant to be. The money was soon lost, the debts had all gone unpaid, began to double and redouble, and the last few games of chance had left him with new debts on top of it all. It seemed as if the family would once again have to pick up and move under the cover of darkness. Dog! Great-Granddad would call into the furnace. Dog! Dog! I wish to speak with you again, my great friend. The few times he was caught doing this, he would simply chase Grandma away and warn her not to come back under the penalty of a whipping. Still, she would listen at the door. My friend! Dog! Hello? Is the fire not hot enough for your liking? Perhaps it is too hot. But the accession grew with each unsuccessful attempt at reaching his mysterious benefactor. Finally, when our great-granddad's creditors came to the house, he wasn't at home, so the creditor felt it was good. Excuse me. Felt it was a good idea to grope his wife and then threaten to take their daughter as payment. Great-grandpa was understandably furious. Dog! I demand your return! He screamed into the flames that night. You make demands? A familiar voice echoed back. The man flung himself at the furnace, falling before it like a witness before Christ. He stared into the fire as the dog's face once again emerged from within. Dog! You must give me more silver! You did not give me enough! Oh? The dog raised its eyes towards the roof of its metal chamber and rolled them to the side. That was the problem, wasn't it? Yes! I miscounted! There wasn't enough to pay off my debts, you see. Now a man threatens my wife and child. I see. So? Where's my money? I will give you no more coins. The dog snapped, looking down its black, cracked nose. Great-Granddad rose to his feet at once and slammed the furnace door. Devil! He screamed. Burn in your hell forever, then. I do not need your help. The man stormed once more towards the cellar steps, full of rage and disappointment. It wasn't until he was halfway up the creaking wooden staircase that he heard a metallic clatter. Here, came a muffled voice within the furnace. I will give you this because I fear for your women. It is not because I believed your lies. Great-grandfather rushed to the small door once more and flung it open. The dog was gone again, and in its place there rested a long, jagged dagger. What? The man yelled, his voice rattling the bolts of the metal case. How am I supposed to pay my debts with... Staring at that gleaming blade, the answer to his problem became very clear. Oh. With his bare hands, great-grandfather dug the dagger out of the fire and once again dropped his reward to the floor where it might cool. Within weeks, a great burden seemed to be lifted from the man's shoulders. It wasn't until a month had passed that the body of his creditor, the one who had molested his wife, was found downriver. He'd obviously been robbed and gone through several times with a very unique blade. It looks as if a god has smiled on us. Great-granddad explained to his family. God? Or dog? He laughed heartily, though his joke made sense only to him. The man finally paid off all of his debts with some currency he'd somehow recently come across. This time there was a bit left over as well. At first there were promises of new clothes, new shoes, and perhaps even an icebox. Soon enough, though, it was all gambled away once more. Sippy time. Then came an unexpected knock at the door. Great-grandfather was in his cellar again, stoking the fire that had mysteriously bore such helpful fruit. He heard a commotion upstairs and the sound of raised voices. The police! He heard amidst the clatter, followed by murder! He listened at the stairs, careful not to reveal himself as great-grandma tried to turn the officers away. We traced the knife back to a museum robbery, ma'am, the authoritative voice rumbled. Some coins were also taken in that same robbery. God. Anyway, and we know for a fact your husband has been using those coins in local establishments. Frantic, the man at first hid himself under the stairs and then abandoned the spot and quietly made his way to the furnace. Dog! He quietly demanded. Dog, what have you done to me, you fool? You cursed us all! Unlike the man's last string of attempts, the voice answered immediately. Have I? It queried. That's a shame. That wasn't my intention at all. Damn you! Help me out of this. Give me money to bribe them, or a weapon to kill them. Give me something, anything. I have nothing more to give you, the doc whined apologetically. I'm afraid it's gone too far by this point. You may as well throw yourself on their mercy. No! Great-granddad struck the searing furnace with his fist. This is all your fault! Now you will make amends! Oh, the dog lowered its head sadly. I suppose you're right. After all, had I known I would cause this much trouble, I never would have found you. Perhaps I can change that. Yes, you must do something, the man pleaded, his anger replaced by terror. You are capable of great things. I know it. You can make it so none of this happened. Can't you? You mean? Yes. I want to undo it. I want to go back and do things differently. I want to go back. The furnace door creaked open, slowly of its own volition, yet inside the dog could not be seen. Come. What? Come to me. On my back you shall ride. Together we shall traverse the thread of time. I will bend this thread and make a loop that shall carry you to safety. The dog was silent for a moment, then spoke again, its voice shaking the foundation. Come. As the police pounded on the cellar door and demanded he come out, great-grandfather leapt into the furnace with a horrified shriek. He was never found. So yes, that was the sort of thing I could expect out of my great-grandmother, and it scarred me for life. Nearly a decade later, a Thanksgiving turkey caught fire in my mom's oven, and I ran out of the house screaming. When I was a teenager, right before Grandma passed away, I stood at her bedside in the hospice and asked her if she could please take back what she had done to me. I cannot, she said in a weak voice. I am not a liar. I insisted, careful to keep from agitating her. I noted the fact that she couldn't possibly know all of the details she told me since she hadn't been there for most of them. That was a clear flaw in her story, right? Wrong. The dog. It told me. It tried to get me in there. In the furnace. My entire life, it kept coming back. Not long after, she was gone. I was in the room when the nurses came rushing in. Grandma was choking loud enough to wake the entire building. They fussed over her and rushed around, putting on a good show, but everyone knew what was coming. I was the last one out of the room after the family had finally paid their respects. I was the only one who saw Grandma's mouth drop open. And I was the only one who saw what she had been choking on. Gathering all my courage, I plucked the silver coin from her tongue. It dropped to the floor as soon as I felt my fingers burning. And that was The Dog in the Furnace! I had fun doing that. I had a lot of fun doing that. Alright.
Some story years.
Fuck yeah. Alright. I'm proud of that one. Alright. Alright, where was the next one? I believe that was the counting song. Yeah, here we go. Counting song.
But she's not here yet.
Alright, well, if that one is GG, we can, let me see here. What is the next one we can do?
Because you are my baby.
Ah, yes, thank you. I will search that because I have the power of Control F. Oh yeah, it was a Reddit no sleep story. Oh, I didn't post a story. Okay, hold on. I gotta go get it from Reddit no sleep because here we go. Here we go. Do you want to do the narration and the baby voice, or do you want me to do the narration and the mother?
I'll do the narration, baby voice.
Alright, well, I got it pulled up.
It's from the baby perspective.
Alright. I have it zoomed in, so hopefully it's easier to read on the Discord stream. And I'm gonna change the song real quick.
Okay, are we good?
Yep.
My mother had the most beautiful teeth. The teeth are my first memory. I remember them long, white, haired, and ferocious, shining under the full moon, and she told me a story. Not a fairy tale or a picture book, but my story. The story of how I'd come to her, or rather how she'd come to me. When I was very small, too small to remember anything at all, my mother stole me from a man and took me to live in the forest. She stole me not as an act of love, but as an act of revenge. Though I was desperate to know, she never told me what needed revenging. One night, I finally asked, "Why won't you tell me?"
Because you are my baby.
She whispered in her low, wet voice. She stroked my face with long fingers. Her teeth glittered under the stars, rich and pale as polished ivory.
My baby will never hear or see or know the cruelties that haunt me.
Cruelty was not the only thing that my mother knew that I did not, although it was the only thing that she refused to teach me. My mother tried very hard to teach me everything else she knew. Unfortunately, I was a very poor pupil indeed. My mother was a remarkable huntress. She felled elk and bear effortlessly. Sometimes she slid into the lake without so much as a ripple, and returned hours later with a monstrous fish clamped in her jaws. Because hunting came so easily to her, Mother expected me to learn quickly.
Men hunt.
She hissed.
They have always hunted, and so shall you.
But I could not hunt, not like her. My small, soft fingers were no match for her lethal claws. My clumsy little body, somehow so susceptible to both the heat and the cold, trailed after her whip-like predator's form. My mother caught deer and foxes with her beautiful teeth, striking from the shadows like a snake. By contrast, my dull teeth could not even crush rabbit bones. I persevered, but did not improve. One night while Mother snaked through the shadows, communing with the trees and invading the dark things prowling in the night, I curled up and wept. She found me that way, weak and weeping. I covered my eyes and held my breath. I knew it was useless. Mother could hear my heartbeat from the other side of the hill, so surely she knew that I was crying. But that small scrap of pride was all I had. Mother stood there for a long while, then she crept forward and covered me with fresh leaves before lying beside me.
I will feed you, always.
She whispered.
Because you are my baby.
In addition to hunting, my mother was a phenomenal creator of shelters. Hold on. Fursky, the kid says my volume was a bit low. I'm kind of speaking immediately.
Oh, well, there we go. I turned you up. That should be better.
Sorry.
You're good.
Alright then, where were we at? Oh. In addition to hunting, my mother was a phenomenal creator of shelters. Sometimes she lived within the earth. snaking through loam and tree roots like treasure hoarding dragons of old. Sometimes she lived in the trees. Many nights I watched in awe as her bones elongated and tore through her rough skin, stretching upward to twist among the branches like an ancient spider god. I would wait patiently, sometimes for hours, as Mother continued or communed with the spirits buried in the roots. And sometimes she lived in the shadows, creeping through the darkness to flush out food and threat alike. So Mother tried to teach me to dig burrows, but I could not dig like her. I was too small and too soft, and far too frightened of the bugs and the moles that tunneled through the earth. So she tried to teach me to live among the tree branches, to rest and listen as the redwoods murmured the long, strange histories of the earth. But my bones could not stretch like Mother's. I could not twist my arms to match the branches. My skin could not interlock with the tree bark, and my blood was too sluggish to melt into the sap. So Mother tried to teach me to live in the shadows, but the darkness terrified me. Every night I hid and wept, imagining the waves of centipedes crawling across my skin. All the night creatures reveled in my fear. Owls swooped down to taunt me, and bats torpedoed towards me, giggling in their shrill, squeaking voices, until Mother slapped them out of the sky. Finally, Mother realized the futility of these lessons, and she dug a deep burrow just for me. She lined it with leaves and slurped the worms and roaches from the walls. When she finished, I burst into tears.
Why do you weep?
She rasped. Because you do everything for me. I knew the laws of nature. I knew the laws of forest creatures and their young. Young that were weak were killed in the nest. Young that could not learn to fend for themselves were abandoned to die. I was weak and soft and coated in terrible, ugly scars. Why do you do everything for me? Mother snaked forward, large hands sinking into the earth. She curled around me and pulled me close.
Because you are my baby.
Mother did not always live in the burrow with me. She roamed the mountains, she burrowed with the moles, slithered with the snakes, grazed with the elk, hunted with the wolves, stood with the trees. When I was very small, I thought she ate the forest, but it was not that simple. She protected it, and in return it sustained her.
My heart
She told me on one rainy night.
is the forest, so this is how it must be.
As I grew older, I developed rudimentary survival skills. I shied away from hunting big game, elk and deer, bears and boar, because I did not protect the forest. It gave nothing. I only took, so I took as little as I could. I trapped rabbits, fished in the streams, and ate wild berries. I dared to take nothing else. Once I could reliably feed myself, Mother stayed away for long stretches, hours, then days, and finally weeks. I missed her terribly with a deep, panicky ache. I confronted her about it one balmy spring evening. You leave me more and more, I accused. Soon you'll leave me forever,
Never.
she murmured. A breeze twinned around us, raising goose flesh on my skin and rippling her long white hair.
I will never leave you.
But you do! I screamed. You already do!
Before you came, I lived among the trees, listening to their warnings. I slept in the warm earth as worms and centipedes nibbled my skin. I spent most of your lifetimes within the forest, little one. So many lives at a time that I had forgotten my own name. I do not leave you. I have left the forest for you.
I didn't come here. You took me,
I did.
she said.
So I will never leave you. When you think I've left, silence yourself and listen. Listen for the way I listen for the trees, the animals, and the stars. If you are silent and you are sincere, you will hear me.
And then she left. Fury and jealousy seared into my heart like a wildfire. She insulted me, she humiliated me, and after all that, she left me. Left me for the centipedes and the wolves and the stupid, chittering bats. I don't need you, I screamed. An owl hooted angrily in response. I don't need you at all.
Then I ran for my burrow, as the earthen door materialized before me, dotting with flowers and wild grasses. Anger swelled inside me. It possessed me, this wild ball of misery born from my own endless fear and inadequacy. As it spoke to me, "Why should you return to the burrow?" it asked. Why indeed? It wasn't mine. It was Mother's. The entire forest belonged to Mother. Without her, the forest could have consumed me long ago. So I turned away from the burrow and I kept running. I will find the end of the forest, I decided. I will leave it once and for all. I ran for days, in the process treating the forest with contempt. I stripped the trees of their leaves to make nightly beds. I threw rots at birds and rabbits. I uprooted bushes and stripped entire groves of their berries, eating until I threw up from sheer excess. And then I ate again, not out of hunger, not out of any need, but out of malice. And one day, long after spring seeded into summer in a verdant explosion of the heat and greenery, I heard voices. I froze immediately. The only voice I knew was Mother's, wet and low, an earthy, rib-shaking whisper. These voices were nothing like Mother's. They were high and somehow infantile, with strange, shrill noises. These voices, they were like mine. Trembling, I dropped low and crept into the underbrush. Sun-warmed leaves brushed against my face, smooth but painfully crisp. The sun was taking its toll on them. I snaked over the ground, pretending I was Mother, slipping through the forest like an invisible snake. I reached a break in the trees and peered through. In a small clearing were 4 creatures. They had pink skin and wore heavy clothing that looked suffocating. Their hands were small and soft. Their faces were smooth and baby-like, some half-formed, wide eyes and rounded with soft noses and plump flesh. I touched my face, flat and smooth. I looked down at myself, mud-streaked, deeply tanned, and marked with a hideous mass of scars, but still soft, hairless, small, weak. There was no mistaking it. These things in the woods, these overdressed half-formed beings with small teeth, no claws, and overlarge eyes, were like me. They were men. I stood up, propelled by panicky excitement, and strode forward. All at once they froze. "What the hell?" one whispered. He lifted something in his arms and pointed it at me. It was long and strange to me, inorganic, not alive, with a wooden handle and a gleaming tube. But then I realized something in the forest was silent. A few birds chirped and sang, and a few buds emitted their persistent drone, but the vast majority, birds, insect, trees, were silent. No rabbits, no deer, certainly no bears. These things, these creatures like me, these men, had silenced the earth. They had stolen from the forest itself. We stared at each other for a long time as ever-growing summer heat filled the clearing like an invisible pool. "Mother," I whispered, "Mother, please help me." She did not, so I turned and ran. The men immediately pursued. I could hear them, yelling, crushing the undergrowth, stamping on the blossoms and buds, snatching branches as they ran. The forest's deathly silence was worse than any cry. "There it is," one of them screamed. A second later, the forest exploded. A deafening boom shook the trees and ate through the air as pain erupted on my shoulder. I didn't dare stop or look. I pressed on, running and crying as the men came after me. The forest seemed to punish me for my earlier cruelty. Brambles scratched my legs, stones cut my feet, branches swiped at my face. Stinging runnels, leaving deep stinging runnels. I thanked the forest for its kindness. I thanked it for punishing me rather than stopping me. The men gasped and wailed amongst themselves. "What the hell is that?" I don't know. I don't know. Is it a kid? Look at its face. Look at its fucking face. That isn't a kid. Something suddenly filled my ears, drowning the sounds of men in the forest, a deep, musical rushing. My birdsong transformed into a turbulent river. And then Mother came, erupting from the trees like a great beast of old. But that's what she was, after all, a great beast, surely a demon of the ancient world. She pounced upon the men, batting them away with like a house cat with its toys. She clamped them between one of her claws, squeezing it until his head separated and went rolling across the ground. One by one, Mother caught and tore them, shredding them the way she had shredded the leaves from my bedding. Blood streaked the forest, turning dirt into mud and dripping from the trees like sluggish rain. Mother dug her claws into the skull of the last survivor and cracked it open like a fruit. Blood and gray brain glistened in the sunlight. The man screamed and screamed and screamed. Mother leaned down and extended her tongue. It curled outward, pale and orange gold like sunrise on a cold, clear morning, and delicately served his brains, curl by curl, so many worms from my burrow walls. By the time he stopped screaming, the forest had returned to its loud, familiar glory, murmuring trees, singing birds, skittering insects, grazing deer. I smiled and ran to Mother. She reared up and screamed.
See what you've done?
Faced me. I looked helplessly at her, blazing eyes, contorted face runneled with earth and wildflowers, sun-bleached bone and pale, spongy rot. My mother, my beautiful demon mother who cleaned me out of revenge and raised me out of obligation, staring at me like I was a man.
When you stone a bird, my heart stops. When you break a branch, my bones snap. When you selflessly strip the shrubs of their fruit, of their very birthright, my skin blisters. When you hurt the forest. Emily. She roared. My heart bleeds.
There you go. I fell to my knees and hid my face. Mother rushed forward on her many limbs and wrapped long fingers around my throat. She lifted me up, dangling me over the forest floor.
I killed men for you. Now more will come. They will trample, they will cut, they will burn, they will kill. They will kill the bears and the cougars and the wolves for they will blame the predators for what I've done for you. Do you see?
The carnage below seemed to swing beneath me, a tapestry of blood-soaked earth and ruined corpses.
Do you see?
Yes, Mother, I whispered. I see. She dropped me. I hit the ground with such force it knocked the wind out of me. Mother pulled back and busied herself with one of the corpses. I looked up, shaking. Birds watched from the trees, waking curious, with full condemnation. I averted my eyes as tears spilled. Mother returned to me. She extended an arm and opened her hand. Upon her large palm were 4 eyes and a large, glistening heart. I stared at them blankly, and then I looked up at her.
4 eyes,
she said.
One from each man, and the heart of the one that shot you. Eat.
My lip quivered. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the gore in my mother's hand. A heart and eyes, raw and plump, alive just minutes ago. Mother, I said, please.
Are you of me? She asked. Or of you of man?
The forest became painfully silent, the animals, the trees, and the insects all waiting with bated breath. I am of you, Mother. I plucked the first eye from her palm. It was round and curiously firm, with a sort of firm, watery texture I associated with half-rotten fruits. The pink, wormy optic nerve dangled. For a terrible moment I thought I would vomit, and then I raised it to my lips and bit in. The eyes were awful, the heart even worse, thick and almost impossible to chew. Mother had to tear it for me, slicing it into manageable pieces with her beautiful teeth. When I finished, Mother picked me up and holding me tightly, streaked back to the burrow as night fell. That night I became ill. I shook and shivered and hallucinated for days. My mind bled with images of dangling eyes, glistening hearts, and skulls cracked apart like pomegranates. Mother lay with me all the while, soothing me with ancient songs like bird songs turned to rivers and cooling me with her damp, earthy breath. Finally, the fever broke. I sat up, gasping as the last vestiges of my nightmare drifted away. Mother sat across the burrow, hunched over tiredly.
You are well.
She said.
I am glad, for I must leave.
I blinked tiredly. Why?
Men.
She said. But you killed them,
There are more.
she said.
They creep into the forest searching for their dead brethren. They are cutting the trees and crushing the flowers and killing the bears, my little one. If I don't stop them, they will even come for you. I have to stop them. My heart is the forest, and so are you. I must protect both.
A lump rose in my throat, shame like I had never known enveloped me. I'm so sorry.
You are my baby. Babies must learn. By learning, they grow.
Mother, I said, am I truly of man? Mother closed her eyes. For a long time she did not speak, and she drew a deep breath.
I took you from a cruel man. Listen, I will now tell you of the cruelties I have endured.
I listened, enraptured and horrified, as she spun her sorry tale. Mother was once a young, beautiful human woman. Surely not more beautiful than you are now, I objected.
Listen!
She said. Mother was alone in the world. She had no family or friends. She once had a family, but they harmed her greatly, so she ran away. She lived in the forest in a small, ragged tent. She ate wild berries, fished in the lake, and boiled water to drink. Laws are strange things. Though Mother hurt nothing and no one, she was breaking the law by living in the forest. She was found and caught and imprisoned. Separated from the trees and the birds, Mother faded quickly. Though she was only jailed for a short while, it nearly killed her. The day she was released was the best day of her life, or so she thought. No sooner had Mother gathered her meager belongings and exited the jail than a guard came up beside her. Where are you headed to? He asked. I'll take you wherever you want to go. Mother was ecstatic.
Take me back to the forest. Take me back to the forest.
She said. The guard obliged, driving her towards the woods, except he stopped too soon. He stopped at a house. His house, it turned out. The guard was a terrible man. He trapped Mother. He hurt her, tortured her, abused her in every way. He cut her open. He burned her. He snapped her bones. And he put a baby in her. Mother was so broken that he missed all the signs of impeding childbirth. When I came, Mother died.
He dumped me in a vat of acid,
Mother told me.
and scattered my liquid remains among the trees. But then I heard you.
Mother smiled faintly. Crumbles of dirt and root fell from her face.
I heard your cry, your need for me.
I do not understand what Mother said next. It is difficult to translate, but the closest I can come to is this. Everyone sings a song to those they love. Most aren't able to hear these songs. If you can't hear, it can't help you. But if you can hear it, a song is the most powerful thing in the world. It kills, calls, it consumes, it destroys, it strengthens, and sometimes it resurrects.
When I were formed again and breathed, I stole you from your father.
Mother said.
Then I brought you here, because you are my baby.
I wept silently because I did not know what to say.
I must go.
She said.
The trees and the animals need me now. So remember, little one, when you are silent and you are sincere, you will hear me.
Then she looked around like a wolf, a snake, and a hawk combined, and left. She did not return. At first I thought nothing of it. I had made a terrible mess. I had summoned men. I had caused the forest to bleed. Mother had a great deal of work ahead of her. But summer slowly bled into fall, and still Mother did not return. When the first snow came, dry and cold, skittering across the landscape like powder, I knew something was wrong. The snows deepened, the forest drifted into its winter sleep, cloaked in an ice and fog. Every night I made myself silent. I mustered all the sincerity I could, and I listened for my mother's voice. It didn't come. I grew thin and sick. My skin burned even as I shivered. My chest grew congested. My throat so sore I couldn't sleep. My breath came in sharp, pained wheezes. Soon I became too weak to leave the burrow. I crawled to the doorway and ate snow. For sustenance, I slurped worms from the earthen walls. It was not enough, and I knew it. Only then, in the quiet and peace and fear of approaching death, did I become truly silent. Only then did I hear the voice of my mother. I heard her in my dreams, the low, rushing voice like music made into water. I am coming, she said. I am coming, because you are my baby. I smiled and slept. Next thing I knew, I was cold and wet and shivering, but awake. I shot up and screamed as my skin brushed the thick, flower-matted hide of my mother. I spun around, smiling, and froze. Mother lay beside me, panting, blood seeped from a hundred wounds, crusting her hair. The bones in her face were crushed and concave, leaking gore and blood. Without opening her eyes, she smiled.
I heard you. I heard your song.
Tears blurred my vision. My chest began to hitch. I couldn't draw a breath. It was like I was sick again, drowning in pus and trapped fluid. Only I wasn't dying this time. My mother was. Then stay, I said. You have to stay because you can hear my song.
No.
She said.
You needed to see me again. But you do not need me.
I need you, Mama. I need you.
No.
She said.
I killed all who would harm you.
But what about the forest? The forest will kill me without you. I chuckled. The feelings came terribly fast and increasingly weak.
You are of me. Remember, you are of me. You are my baby.
My mother, my beautiful ancient mother, drew a shallow breath and lay still. I lay beside her for many days, but when she began to stink, I left. A hiker eventually found me, a stupid, solitary hiker with a soft heart and a great deal of patience and no fear. When I learned to speak the words of men, the authorities lost no time in telling me that my mother was not really my mother. They discovered my identity, at least in a manner of speaking, through DNA. My real mother, they say, was a vagrant, a Jane Doe who lived in a tent in the national park. She was alone and defenseless, two things that attract human monsters. After a brief stint in jail for loitering, my mother ended up kidnapped, imprisoned, and tortured by an as-yet unidentified assailant who eventually tried unsuccessfully to dissolve her in acid. They think he attempted to dissolve my body too. That's why I'm covered in scars. It is why I frightened those hunters so long ago. The acid burns make me look like a monster to men. Since my real mother apparently died long ago, they decided that mother, whomever she was nothing but a crazy, homeless child abuser. But now I know better. Even so, I adapted. I had no choice. I am of my mother, but I live among men. That's what animals must do. Their young learn, grow, and adapt. If they don't, they die. But I am not adapting anymore. At least I'm not adapting to live among men. My mouth is changing in ways that are terrible to people, but wonderful to me. It's my teeth, you see. I am growing mother's beautiful teeth. Looking at my teeth in the mirror was frightening and electrifying. Joy and terror ran through my veins in equal measures. It had to mean something. So I fell silent. I became sincere. I listened. And I heard. I heard the voice of mother. low and rushing like birds saw turned into a wild river. She tells me I don't belong with the men because I am her heart, and her heart is the forest. She tells me I must return, and she tells me she is waiting for me because I am her baby.
Also, like, that was really good. I completely spaced the fuck out and forgot to change the TV, like, icon, but it's okay. Alright, do we want to read the counting song, or were we waiting for Gigi to do that?
The counting song is Gigi's, so we're waiting for her on that, and then Hem House is also Gigi's, so we're waiting on that.
Alright. Let me do a thingy dingy here. Ba 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 ba.
Yes, chat, I'm sorry it's so quiet. My voice is a bit sore tonight, and I'm living with other people in a house, and they are asleep. I do not wish to disturb them, so I must stay quiet. My apologies.
I can take over for a little while if you want. I have like a couple ones that I can just read off of slimebeast.com.
Alright then. I can't tell did Kit like it or no. I think he's freaked out by it. I'm sorry.
Alright. Well, if Gigi doesn't show up for this stream, I completely understand. Everybody should say we love you, Gigi, in the chat. Because like I said, Gigi's in a rock and a hard place, like, right now. So everyone give we love you, Gigi, in the chat. Alright. Now, let me go over... Yeah. I haven't really been reading the YouTube chat here. Yeah, loved it. Good. Glad you guys are enjoying it. Let me pull this up. Another animal pasta. This one is called The Cat That Wrote. And I'm gonna just get started here. I don't have a image for this one for the TV, so we're just gonna keep the dog in the furnace on the TV screen because that's kind of our feature film of the night. All right. Okay, let me change the music because we've been on this one for a fucking while. Change the song. All right. Just to set one thing straight. Oh wait, no, I have a better one. Hold on, let me turn on. I have some epic music for this. Hold on. Do 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 do. Hey, where is it? Where is it? Is it this one? Yeah, I think this is it. Here we go. This is a favorite song of mine from American McGee's Alice. I know I can't get copyrighted for this shit because this game is like as old as I am. This game is 20 fucking years old and the IP is not going to get renewed because EA are a bunch of cocksuckers. Just to set one thing straight from... Oh, sorry. Excuse me. You's all good. Just to set one thing straight from the beginning, I photograph events, weddings, sweet 16s, stuff like that. I'm not in photography for art's sake, even though people have always said I have a great eye. It's never interested me on that level, but rather than throw away what everyone insists was a gift, I decided to meet them halfway and turn it into a revenue stream. Up until a while back, the strangest thing I'd taken pictures of was a 3-year-old's 21st birthday. I shit you not, the kid had some kind of terminal disease, and her mom wanted to give her every birthday party and Christmas she'd ever have within that 1 year. She'd still be alive. Sad as fuck. But now that's the second weirdest job I actually took. We're not going to get into the creepy jobs I rejected, mostly old men who wanted a discreet photographer for God knows what. The weirdest customer, as of right now, was the crazy cat lady. Her name was Ruth or Rhonda or some stale old R name like that. Rhoda? I don't know. It doesn't matter because crazy cat lady is more fitting. She called up one afternoon when I had little else to do. I couldn't really tell what she wanted at first because she tended to mutter and ramble, a deadly combination when it comes to conversation. Gotta grab some water. It took several tries for me to pull the reason for the call out of her. She had seen a local news story about a deformed house cat who was taking the internet by storm. She called it sad cat, but I'm pretty sure she meant grumpy since that's the only one I heard of. Shout out to Tartar Sauce. As it turned out, one of her cats was special too. When she explained that she had 18 cats currently, as she put it, I figured it was no big surprise to hear an inbred mutant had popped out somewhere along the line. Regardless, she wanted me to photograph her cat and stick it in the computer so she'd be rich like sad cat's owners. I was entirely sure she had no idea how this sort of thing worked, but since she was willing to pay my fee and she seemed like a harmless fuddy-duddy, I agreed to take the pictures. Have you ever smelled cats? I mean, just an ungodly amount of cats. Litter boxes, dander, cat sick, and stale food. That was the crazy cat lady's house. I could smell it from the doorstep where I stood on a cat-shaped welcome mat that read, "Meow do you do." An actual, peering, feline face greeted me from between the porch slats that stared up at me with moon eyes and disappeared back into the dark. I expected the doorbell to play the Meow Mix theme when I pressed it. Okay, that's actually funny. But instead, it simply didn't work. I rapped on the door a few times and stood back from the odor. The crazy cat lady didn't stop talking when she let me into her hovel. She was a hoarder, of course. Stacks of plastic bins and boxes were filled with random objects, creating tight spaces and a small, branching path of clean floor to traverse between them. Nothing was really garbage, per se. There were old dolls, heaps of clothing, and gift wrap presents she must have never been able to give away. To be honest, other than the smell, I was most off-put by the never-ending jumble of words that came out of her mouth. Her son was a fisherman with red hair and a huge beard. Oh, she had 2 sons. One was a fisherman and the other was a state trooper who refused to give her yellow flowers every Mother's Day until 5 years ago. And her husband, a Navy man, died of a heart attack. I wonder why. Also, her sons married awful women and the county was harassing her. I could go on, but you'd probably see what I was dealing with already. We stopped at the dining room, or what could have been a dining room if not for the junk. The table at the center of the area had various clothing items and boxes on it, and the chairs were tucked under it, similarly used for storage. Sitting on top of the heap was the cat, a smoky gray cat with black ear tips. The cat that wrote. Alright, where can I do this? School days. That's a good one. I'm sure the old woman was still talking, but I couldn't tell you what she had said at that point. I was too busy staring at the stocky little creature in front of me. Its black, liquid eyes were locked with mine, and even though it had a particularly stoic attitude, I felt a sudden and deep sense of dread. It sat up, ears pricked, with perfectly formed, furry little human hands placed gingerly against its perch. The hands were gray like the rest. Each finger and thumb bore the white glint of a retractable claw. It was then that I realized I hadn't seen any of the woman's 18 cats save for the random stranger outside until that very moment. The others, all of them, were gathered in the dining room. They roughly encircled this strange cat, none of them sitting higher than it. Unlike the central figure, they only cared to glance at me before losing interest. When I started retaining the crazy cat lady's words once more, she explained that this was a very smart kitty who could do all sorts of interesting things with its amazing paws. To clarify once again, these were not paws. I asked what exactly the cat could do. Apparently it could open doors, turn lights on or off, and would occasionally write kitty words, as she put it. She was also hoping someday to teach it how to knit. Nothing too complex, of course. I looked at the walls and spotted the hundreds of sticky notes and tattered papers taped to each surface. Among the debris of the insane woman's house, I hadn't even registered them. Each slip displayed random scribbles, crude stick people, and foreign letters that seemed familiar in some ancient part of the back of my mind. Kitty words, huh? Quickly, I made sense of the situation. This was a cat born with deformed front paws that, through the miracle of random bullshit, looked enough like hands to be sort of disconcerting. I've heard of smart cats who could open doors or jump at light switches before, so that was nothing special. And the writing was probably nothing more than the old woman herself holding the cat in one hand and making it right with the other. She was clearly demented, so why wouldn't she think that made sense to do? So I took the photos. The lady hung a curtain as a backdrop so no one on the internet would see her living conditions. The cat didn't move from its spot, though its head and eyes followed my every movement like an owl would. I almost expected its head to rotate in a complete circle as I walked around it, but thankfully that didn't happen. When I had taken the proper amount of pictures, I went to show the digital images to the crazy cat lady for her approval. It was a simple matter of holding the camera out as we both looked over the small screen and agreed upon which photos were the best, etc. She didn't see anything odd. All she did was coo and titter at the images. She remarked on what a beautiful cat it was and how clever its hands were. She praised my photographic skills to the point where I wasn't sure if she was making fun of me or not. I didn't like the photos at all, however. Each picture was from the correct angle, The photos I had taken were from the same positions, with subject in the proper location. The problem is that didn't change. None of the photos depicted the backdrop or even the old woman's house. Instead, they showed a white, spotless room and a perfect cube of brightness devoid of any character. Sitting in the cat's place was a worn wooden chair with peeling red paint and an old man sitting upon it. The man was gnarled, nude, yellowed and dirty like a stale corpse. In each picture, the man's head turned away from the camera so I couldn't see his face. I asked the crazy cat lady if the photos were really perfect. I asked that several times and even held the camera closer to her face to make sure she was seeing the same photo. Still, she just remarked that her little kitty was adorable. On the downside, I eventually told her I uploaded her pictures to the web even though I deleted them that day in the car outside her house. On the plus side, though, I never cashed her check. In a few days or weeks, she would probably forget the whole idea anyway. I'm still not sure what happened to the camera. If anything did happen to it, of course, and I have no idea why or how that cat existed at all. I didn't really want to know. I really don't want to know. It was the sort of thing that you want to put behind you and pretend never happened so you can continue living a life free of straitjackets and shock therapy. Unfortunately, like most things you'd rather forget, it refuses to go away. Every time I wake up in the middle of the night feeling as if my nose had been pinched shut by some small hairy fingers. Every time I choke in the middle of the night and spit out the mangled, bloodied corpse of a bird, I'm reminded of a fact I'll never be able to unknow the cat that wrote and it will never unsee me. When she said it could open doors, I didn't know that she meant locks. And that was the cat that wrote. Oh, Gigi's here! Gigi! Hello.
Hello there.
Chat.
Oh, let me move Gigi's still real quick. There we go. Sweet!
Yay.
Alright. My vocal cords need a bit of a break, so if you guys want to read the counting song without me, I'd appreciate it.
I don't mind doing it.
Alright, awesome.
Okay.
Let me.
I don't have a quote up, so Gigi, you start that one.
All right, I can just do. It's actually fairly short. If you just want
Yeah, I
me
knew
to do
that
it.
one was short. Yeah, Gigi can do that one, and then we're gonna move on to what Gigi had planned, which was pen pal.
Hell yes.
Sounds good to
I still
me.
don't know who's
I'm
doing
gonna
it,
go
but we're
refill my
gonna
water.
figure it out.
Oh, I'm so excited. All right, this is the counting song. Have you ever heard the counting song? I drew a sip from my glass and leaned back on the tall wooden chair. I'd stoked the fire well enough, and it seemed to adequately warm my guests. The counting song, Harris repeated. I'm sure I haven't. Neither have I, Wallace added. The two men could have been brothers, both heavy in stature, balding similarly, with nearly identical gray pants, still flecked by rain. At least Wallace had opted for a mustard button-up shirt, while Harris seemed casual in a powder blue t-shirt. That helped keep them separate. They even seemed to share the same facial hair. That is to say, they each got part of it. Harris got the thick mustache and soul patch, Wallace the wild sideburns. I'm sure if I sing it to you, you'll remember. I smiled. My father taught it to me, and his father taught it to him, and so on. Just one of those things, I suppose. Well, if you've called us out here to sing, Wallace started. You could have done that over the phone, Harris finished. No, you're not here just to listen to my haggard off-key voice. That's part of it, though. When will we see your specter? Said Wallace. Yes, the phantom, said Harris. In time, gentlemen. First, the song. The three of us had long been men of adventure. We sought out the Yeti, searched for the Jersey Devil, and we had plans to visit Loch Ness when the stars aligned in our favor. Each of us wanted to witness something beyond human understanding, something that gave meaning outside of the ignorant, pedestrian civilization of man. Little had any of the expected that all of these failed. Very expensive escapades could have been avoided if I'd simply remembered my father's song a bit earlier. The song, as I was told, could bring such a creature directly into our midst, though it was to be performed only under very specific circumstances. Circumstances that had just now come to pass. Here it is, friends. I took another sip and cleared my throat. Forgive me if it sounds a bit raw. And so I sang. 10 lights in the room, 9 matches on the broom, 8 symbols of pride, 7 chairs put aside, 6 logs burning hot, 5 livers in the pot, 4 boots wet with rain, 3 glasses of champagne, 2 friends for which to pour, 1 man is at the door, a stranger it's true, not unlike me and you, black, white, and in between, gentle, cruel, kind and mean, round and square, short and long, this is his counting song. After I finished the song, short as it was, the 2 men in their blank faces merely stared in disappointed confusion. I don't understand. Harris shook his head, stroking his chin. Don't you? I smirked. Hey, Wallace was the first to catch on. 2 friends for which to pour. That's us. Harris looked into his glass of champagne, then to mine, then to Wallace's. I could almost hear the anguished mother's cry of his brain struggling to birth an idea too hefty for the established canal. The champagne, Harris nodded slowly, and the chairs. That's why we're sitting on seats from the dining room, 3 here and 7 set aside. The 2 of them were now seized by the giddy childlike joy of spotting the hidden clues around them. That broom, the handle is notched. 8, 9, 10 different lights in the room, and that smell. You're boiling kidneys, am I right? You have 8 symbols of pride displayed, 4 trophies, 3 mounted animal heads, and your Medal of Honor is in the curio. Oh, and the 4 rained-on boots. Those are our boots. What's left? Ah, the logs. 5 logs in the fire. It doesn't matter to me which man said that, nor should it matter to you. That's all, Harris bore a wide grin. We've spotted them all. Is that the game? No, I murmured. Then what is the game? Wallace seemed confused again. I mean, no, you haven't spotted them all. Remember the last one? The most important one? I was growing a bit tired of their dull-witted nonsense. Uh-huh. Harris looked at Wallace. Nope, that was all of them. Wallace turned to Harris. The man, I snapped. The man at the door. This is the source of all of our trouble. I stood from my seat and turned towards the fire, a rage clearly visible on my face as I did so. The Yeti, the Chupacabra, we've never seen hide nor hair of them, and I am thoroughly convinced that the cause of such disappointment is your feeble-minded fumbling. Forgetting to bait the traps, leaving our food out for the bears. Now wait a moment, Harris started, furrowing his brow and raising a fist in protest. Quickly I turned, bringing the fireplace poker down onto his thick skull. Not as thick as all that, as it turned out. Wallace had only but a moment to let out the most pathetic yelp before the poker ran him through at the heart. The ease with which the superheated metal passed between his ribs brought me only the most fleeting sense of shock. When the twitching stopped, the stupid, infantile, aggravated twitching, I sang the song for them again. This time, I gave them the correct version. 10 lights in the room, 9 notches on the broom, 8 symbols of pride, 7 chairs put aside, 6 logs burning hot, 5 livers in the pot, 4 boots wet with rain, 3 glasses of champagne, 2 dead on the floor, 1 man is at the door, a stranger it's true, not unlike me and you. Black, white, and in between, gentle, cruel, kind, and mean, round, square, short, and long, this is his counting song. I had surmised they would not catch the flaw in my song, the break in cadence, 2 friends for which to pour, and its extra syllable should have also rung out like a gunshot in their ears. Alas, the both of them remained too dim, too uncultured to spot it. There was a knock, and then a second. The slow, solid thrust of that unseen fist told me that my guest had arrived. I opened the door, and I let the man in.
Yeah, that's good. That's good shit.
Yeah, this one was cool. I'd never read it.
I haven't read him
Story, just
either.
wanna fucking summon Slenderman. That's how you do it. You just sing him a song.
No, oh no.
Nah, just joking.
Not the Slenderman.
All right, we're doing pen pal now, or do we want to like have a little bit of a chatty break?
That's entirely up to y'all.
We could do pen pal. Who was doing what part? There's so many chapters.
I figured if you read the first chapter, then it actually divides itself up fairly well. So you read chapter 1, and I read, first he reads 2, I read 3.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah,
then I just read.
On the
just
website,
pen
I think
pal.
it has it divided up into the chapters.
Okay, because the first chapter is just pen pal, unless you mean footsteps.
Let's see. Pen pal, and then you should read footsteps. And then, let's see. You read footsteps, first you'll read balloons, I read boxes, and we just go from there. How's that?
And I got it pulled up, so I guess we'll begin. Alright. This is
Alright.
long. Alright,
But
this
this
is
is
long,
so
so I
good.
apologize for that.
And yes, I did hear it on Creekcast. Wendigoon and Meat Canyon are very good boys, and they read good stories. So, yes, this is where I found it.
Alright, this is long, so I apologize for that. I've never had to tell this story with enough detail to actually explain it all the way. But it is true, and it happened when I was about 6 years old. Footsteps. In a quiet room, if you press your ear against a pillow, you can hear your heart. As a kid, the muffled, rhythmic beats sounded like soft footsteps on a carpeted floor. And so, as a kid, almost every night, just as I was about to drift off to sleep, I would hear these footsteps and I'd be whipped back into consciousness, terrified. For my entire childhood, I lived with my mother in a fairly nice neighborhood. I was in a transitional phase. People with lower economic means were gradually moving in, and my mother and I were 2 of these people. We lived in this kind of house you could see being transported in 2 pieces on the interstate. But my mom took good care of it. There were a lot of woods surrounding the neighborhood, and I would play in and explore during the day. But at night, as things often do as a kid, it took on a more sinister feeling. This coupled with the fact that due to the nature of our house, was a very large crawl space underneath, filled my mind with imaginary monsters and inescapable scenarios which would consume my thoughts when I was awoken by the footsteps. I told my mom about the footsteps, and she said that it was just me imagining things. I persisted enough that she blasted my ears with water from a turkey baster once to placate me, since I thought that would help. Of course it did. Despite all the creepiness and the footsteps, the only weird thing that ever happened was that every now and then I would wake up in the bottom bunk despite having none to sleep on the top. But this wasn't really weird since I'd sometimes get up to piss or something, get something to drink. I can remember just going back to sleep in the bottom bunk. I'm an only child, so it didn't matter. That's what happened. But waking up on the bottom bunk wasn't too terrifying, but one night I didn't wake up on the bottom bunk. I had heard the footsteps, but was too far gone to be woken by them. And when I was awoken, it wasn't from the sound of footsteps or a nightmare, but because I was cold, really cold. When I opened my eyes, I saw stars. I was in the woods. I sat up immediately and tried to figure out what was going on. I thought I was dreaming, but that didn't seem right. But neither did me being in the woods. There was a deflated pool float right in front of me, one of those ones shaped like a shark. This only added to the surreal feeling. But after a while, it seemed like I just wasn't going to wake up because I wasn't asleep. I stood up to orient myself, but I didn't recognize these woods. I'd played in the woods by my house all the time, so I knew them really well. But if these weren't the same woods, then how could I get out? I took a step and felt a shooting pain in my foot, which knocked me back to where I had been laying. I had stepped on a thorn. By the light of the moon, I could see that they were everywhere. I looked at my other foot, but it was fine. And as a matter of fact, so was the rest of me. I didn't have another scratch on me, and I wasn't even that dirty. I cried for a little bit and stood back up. I didn't know which way to go, so I just picked a direction. I resisted the urge to call since I wasn't sure I wanted to be found by who or what might be out there. I walked for what seemed like hours. I tried to walk in a damn it, fucking Wattpad. I tried to walk in a straight line. God fucking, I hate Wattpad, by the way. Just look at that real quick. I tried to walk in a straight line, but tried to course correct when I had to take detours. But I was a kid and I was afraid. There weren't any howls or screams, and only once did I hear any noise that scared me. It sounded like a crying baby. I think now that it was just a cat. But I panicked, and I ran, veering in different directions to avoid big fits of bushes and collapsed trees, and I was paying close attention to where I stepped because by that point my feet were in pretty bad shape. I paid too much attention to where I was stepping and not enough to where those steps were leading me because not long after hearing the cry, I saw something that filled me with some kind of despair I haven't experienced since. It was the pool float. I was only 10 feet from where I had woken up. This wasn't magic or supernatural space bending. I was lost. Up until that moment, I thought more and more about getting out of those woods than how I got in. But being back at the beginning caused my mind to swim. I wasn't even sure that these were my woods. I had only been hoping that they were. I had run in a huge circle around that spot. Or did I just get turned around and start to make my way back? How was I going to get out? At the time, I thought the North Star was just the brightest star, and so I looked at it and found the brightest star and followed it. Eventually, things started to look more familiar, and when I saw the ditch, a dirt ditch that my friend and I would have dirt clod wars in, I knew I had made it out. By that point, I was walking really slowly because my feet hurt so much, but I was so happy to be so close to home that I broke into a light jog. When I actually saw the roof of my house over a neighboring lower set house, I let out a light sob and ran faster. I just wanted to be home. I had already decided that I wouldn't say anything because I had no idea what I could possibly say. I would get back to the house somehow, clean up, and get into bed. My heart sunk as I rounded the corner. My house came fully into view. Every light in the house was on. I knew my mom was up, and I knew I would have to explain, or try to explain, where I had been, but I couldn't even figure out where to start. My run became a jog, which became a walk. I saw her silhouette through the blinds. And although I was worried about how to explain things to her, it didn't matter to me at that point. I walked up a couple steps to the porch and put my hand on the doorknob and turned. Right before I pushed in, two arms wrapped around me and pulled me back. I screamed as loud as I could, "Mom, please help me! Mom, please!" The feeling of being so close to being safe and then being physically pulled away filled me with a kind of dread that is, even after all these years, indescribable. The door had been torn away from opening, and a flash of hope shot through my heart, but it wasn't my mom. It was a man, and he was enormous. I thrashed around and kicked the shins of the person holding me, while also trying to get away from the person who had just come out of my house. I was scared, and I was furious. Let me go. Where is she? Where is my mom? What did you do to her? As my throat stung from screaming and I was drawing in another breath, I became aware of a sound that had been present for longer than I had perceived it. Honey, please calm down. I've got you. It sounded like my mom. The arms loosened and sent me down as a man approached me, blocked out the porch light with his head, and I noticed his clothes. He was a cop. I turned to face the voice behind me and saw it really was my mom. Everything was okay. I began to cry, and the three of us went inside. I'm so glad you're home, sweetie. I was so worried I'd never see you again. By that point, she was crying too. I'm sorry. I don't know what happened. I just wanted to come home. I'm sorry. It's okay. Just don't ever do that again. I'm not sure me or my shins could have taken it. A little laughter broke through my sobs, and I smiled a bit. Well, I'm sorry for kicking you, but why did you have to grab me like that? I was afraid you would try to run away again. I was confused. What do you mean? We found your note on your pillow, she said, and pointed at a piece of paper that the police officer was sliding across the table. I picked up the note and read it. It was a running away letter. It said that I was unhappy and never wanted to see her or any of my family or my friends ever again. The police officer exchanged a few words with my mom on the porch while I stared at the letter. I didn't remember writing the letter. I didn't remember anything about any of this. But even if I sometimes went to the bathroom at night and didn't remember, or even if I could have gone into the woods on my own, even if that would have been true, the only thing I knew at that point was, this isn't how you spell my name. I didn't write this letter. Alright. Who's next?
I have no idea, like, what, like, part to read, because, like, Wattpad is really dyslexic. I don't even know if I'm on the right story.
Okay, are you... I forget, Gigi, did we say that first go would read balloons? Right?
I mean, I'm on balloons right now. I think Gigi might have gone AFK.
Okay, just give us a minute, chat. We're gonna figure this out.
Hello, Dreamy Chan and Rainstorms.
Used to use Wattpad when I was a teenager. I switched off of Wattpad months ago, and I have been so much happier. AO3 for the win, because you don't get the weird fucking mobile interface scrolly shit when you try to use it on desktop. It's not optimized for it, and it sucks.
Welcome back, Gigi.
Can you hear me now? Oh,
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you now. So is first he's supposed to read balloons?
Yes.
Alright, cool. Because, like, I was like, this context on this website you linked is, like, not the same. So I was, like, confused. Alright, so this is balloons.
Alright. Hell yeah. I love this story.
Alright. When I was, a couple days ago, I posted a story called Footsteps Here. There were a number of questions that made me curious about certain details about my childhood, and so I spoke about it with my mother. Exacerbated by my questions, she said, "Why don't you just tell them about the goddamn balloons if they're so interested?" As soon as she said that, I remembered so much about my childhood that I had forgotten. The story will provide some greater context for the previous story, which I think you should read first. Though the order isn't of vital importance, reading that story first will put you in my place more effectively, since I remembered the events of Footsteps first. If you have questions or anything, feel free to ask and I'll try to answer them. Also, both stories are long, so heads up on that. I'm just hesitant to leave out any details that might be important. When I was 5 years old, I went to an elementary school that, from what I've come to understand, was really adamant about the importance of learning through activity. It was part of a new program designed to allow children to rise at their own pace, and to facilitate this, the school encouraged teachers to come up with really inventive lesson plans. Each teacher was given the latitude to create his or her own themes, which would run for the duration of the grade, and all the lessons of math, reading, etc. would be designed in the spirit of the theme. These things were called groups. There was a space group, a sea group, an earth group, and the group I was in was community. In kindergarten in this country, you don't learn much except how to tie your shoes and how to share. So most of it isn't very memorable. I only remember two things very clearly. I was the best at writing my name in the right way, and the balloon project, which was really the hallmark of the community group, since it was a pretty clever way to show how a community functioned at a really basic level. You've probably heard of this activity. On one Friday, I remember it being Friday because I was excited about the project and it being the end of the week, toward the beginning of the year, we walked into the classroom in the morning and saw that there was a fully inflated balloon tied off with string taped to each of our desks. I think I did this, in my kindergarten now that I'm, looking back on it. Yeah, we did this stuff. Okay, back to the story. Sitting on each of our desks was a marker, a pen, a piece of paper, and an envelope. The project was to write a note on the paper, put it in the envelope, and attach it to the balloon, which we could draw a picture on if we wanted. Most of the kids started fighting over the balloons because they wanted different colors, but I started on my note, which I had thought a lot about. All the notes had to follow a loose structure, but were allowed to be creative within those boundaries. My note was something like, "Hi, you found my balloon. My name is Name, and I attend blank elementary school. You can keep the balloon, but I hope you write me back. I like Mighty Max, exploring, building forts, swimming, and my friends. What do you like? Write me back soon. Here's $1 for the mail." On the dollar, I wrote 4 stamps right across the front, which my mom said was unnecessary. But I thought I was a genius, so I did it. The teacher took a Polaroid of each of us with our balloons and had us put them in the envelope along with our letter. They also included another letter that I assume explained the nature of the project and sincere appreciation for anyone's participation in writing back and sending photos of their city or neighborhood. That was the whole idea, to build a sense of community without having to leave the school and to establish safe contact with other people. It seemed like such a fun idea. Over the next couple of weeks, the letters started to roll in. Most came with pictures of different landmarks, and each time a letter would come in, the teacher would pin the picture on a big wall map that we had put up, showing where the letter had come from and how far the balloon had traveled. It was a really smart idea, because we actually looked forward to coming to school to see if we had gotten our letter. For the duration of the year, we had one day a week where we would write back to our pen pal or another student's pen pal in case our letter hadn't come in yet. Mine was one of the last to arrive. When I came into the classroom, I looked at my desk and once again didn't see any letter waiting for me, but as I sat down, the teacher approached me and handed me an envelope. I must have looked so excited because as I was about to open it, she put her hand on mine and stopped me and said, "Please don't be upset." I didn't understand what she meant. Why would I be upset now that my letter had come? Initially, I was mystified that she would even know what was in the envelope, but now I realized that, of course, the teachers had screened the contents to make sure there was nothing obscene, but all the same, how could I be disappointed when I opened the envelope? I understood. There was no letter. The only thing in the envelope was a Polaroid, but I couldn't really make out what it was. It looked like a patch of desert, but it was too blurry to decipher. It appeared as if the camera had been moved while the picture was being taken. There was no return address, so I couldn't even write back if I wanted to. I was crushed. Oh my goodness, sorry about that, chat. I had to let out a dog yawn. The school year pressed on, and the letters had stopped coming for nearly all of the other students. After all, you can only continue a written correspondence with a kindergartner for so long. Everyone, including myself, had lost interest in the letters almost completely. Then I got another envelope. My excitement was rejuvenated, and I reveled in the fact that I was still getting a letter when most of the other pen pals had abandoned their involvement. It made sense that I received another delivery. There had been nothing but a blurry picture on the first one, so this is probably going to make up for that. But then again, there was no letter at all. Just another picture. This one was more distinguishable, but I still didn't understand it. The photograph was angled way up, catching the top corner of a building, and the rest of the image was distorted by a lens flare from the sun. Because the balloons didn't travel very far, and because they were all launched on the same day, the board became a bit cluttered, and so the policy for students still exchanging letters became that they could take the photographs home. My best friend Josh had the second highest number of pictures taken home by the end of the year. His pen pal was really cooperative in sending pictures from all around the neighboring city. Josh took home, I think, 4 pictures? I took home nearly 50. The envelopes were all opened by the teacher, but after a while I stopped even looking at the pictures. However, I saved them in one of my drawers that houses my collections of rocks, baseball cards, comic book cards, Marvel Meta cards, for those who might remember, and little miniature baseball battling helmets that I get out of a vending machine at Winn-Dixie after a t-ball game. With the school year over, my attention turned to other things. My mom had got me a small snow cone machine for Christmas that year. That's fucking badass. And Josh had really coveted it, so much that his parents bought him a slightly nicer one for his birthday, which was towards the end of the school year. That summer we had the idea that we would set up a snow cone stand to make some money. We thought we'd make a fortune selling snow cones at $1. Josh lived in a different neighborhood, but we eventually decided that my neighborhood would be better because there were a lot of people who cared for their lawns. The yards in my neighborhood were slightly bigger. We did this for 5 weekends in a row until my mom told us that we had to stop, and I've only recently come to understand why she did that. On the 5th weekend that Josh and I were counting our money because we both had a machine, we each had a separate stack of money that we put together into one stack and then split evenly. We had made a total of $16 that day. And as Josh paid out my $5, feeling a profound surprise consumed me. The dollar said 4 stamps. Josh noticed my shock and asked if he had miscounted. I told him about the dollar and he said, "That's so cool, man." As I thought about it, I came to agree. The idea that the dollar had made it right back to me after changing so many hands had floored me. I rushed inside to tell my mom, but my excitement coupled with her being distracted by a phone call made my story incomprehensible, and she responded simply by saying, "Oh wow, that's neat." Frustrated, I ran back outside and told Josh I had something to show him. Back in my room, I opened the drawer and took out the stack of envelopes and showed him some of the pictures. I started with the first picture and we went through about 10 before Josh lost interest and asked if I wanted to go play in the ditch. A dirt ditch down in the street from my house before his mom came to pick him up, so that's what we did. We had a dirt war for a while, but it was interrupted several times by rustling in the woods around us. There was raccoons and stray cats that lived in there. But this is making a little too much noise, and we traded guesses at what it was in an attempt to scare each other. My last guess was that it was a mummy, but in the end, Josh kept insisting that it was a robot because of the sounds that we heard. Before we left, he got a little serious and looked me right in the eyes and said, "You heard it, didn't you? It sounded like a robot. You heard it too, right?" I had heard it, and since it sounded mechanical, I agreed that it was probably a robot, since only now that I understand what we heard. There's a man in the woods. When we got back, Josh's mom was waiting for him at the kitchen table with my mom. Josh told his mom about the robot. Our moms laughed and Josh went home. My mom and I ate dinner and then I went to bed. I didn't stay in bed for long before I crept out and decided that due to the day's events, I would revisit the envelopes. I would revisit the envelope since now the whole affair seemed to be much more interesting. I took the first envelope and set it on the floor and set the blurry desert Polaroid on top. I laid the second envelope right next to it and placed the oddly angled Polaroid of the building's top corner on top and did this with each picture until they formed a grid that was about 5 by 10. I was always taught to be careful with things that I was collecting, even if I wasn't sure if they were valuable. I noticed that the pictures became gradually more decipherable. There was a tree with a bird on it, a speed limit sign, a power line, a group of people walking in some building. And then I saw something that vexed me so powerfully that I can now, as I write this, distinctly remember feeling dizzy and capable of only a single repeating thought. Why am I in this picture? In this photograph of the group of people entering the building, I saw myself holding hands with my mother in the very back of the crowd of people. We were at the very edge of the photo, but it was undeniably us, and as my eyes swam over the sea of Polaroids, I became increasingly anxious. It was a really odd feeling. It wasn't fear, it was the feeling you get when you are in trouble. I'm not sure why I was flooded with that feeling, but there I sat, floundering in the distinct sense that I had done something wrong. And this feeling only intensified as I looked upon the rest of the photos, and after that one had so powerfully struck me. I was in every photo. None of them were in close shots. None of them were only of me, but I was in every single one of them. Off to the side, in the back bottom of the frame, some of them only had the tiniest part of my face captured at the very edge of the photo. But nevertheless, I was there. I was always there. I didn't know what to do. Your mind works in funny ways as a kid, but there was a large part of me that was afraid of getting in trouble simply for being up. Since I had already had the looming feeling of having done something wrong, I decided I would wait until tomorrow. The next day, my mom was off work and spent most of the morning cleaning up around the house. I watched cartoons, I imagine, and waited until I thought it was a good time to show her the Polaroids. When she went out to get the mail, I grabbed a couple of the pictures and put them on the table in front of me as I sat waiting for her to come back in. When she returned, she was already opening the mail and threw some junk into the mail, or threw some junk mail into the trash can, and I said, "Mom, can you come here for a second? I have these pictures." "Just give me a minute, honey. I need to mark these on the calendar." After a minute or two, she came and stood behind me and asked what I needed. I could hear her shuffling with the mail behind me, but I just looked at the Polaroids and told her about them. As I explained more and pointed the pictures to her frequent and okays decreased, she was suddenly very quiet and only making little noise with the mail. The next noise I heard from her sounded as if she was trying to catch her breath in a room that had no air left. Her last struggling gasps were conquered, and she simply dropped the remaining mail on the table and ran to the kitchen to get the phone. "Mom, I'm sorry, I didn't know about these. Please don't be mad at me." With the phone pressed to her ear, she was walking/running back and forth and shouting into it. Nervously, I fiddled with the mail sitting next to my Polaroids. The top envelope had something sticking out of it that I thoughtlessly and anxiously pulled out until it came out. It was another Polaroid. Confused, I thought that somehow one of my Polaroids had slipped into the stack where she threw the mail down, but when I turned it over and looked at it, I realized that I had not seen this one before. To my dismay, it was me, but this one was a much closer shot. I was surrounded by trees and smiling, but it wasn't just me. I noticed Josh was there too, and this was us from yesterday. I started yelling for my mom, who was still screaming into the phone. I repeated and yelled for her until she spun with, "What?" And I could only think to ask, "Who are you calling?" "I'm talking with the police, honey." "But why? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do anything." She answered me with a response that I never understood until I was forced to revisit these events from the earliest years of my life. She grabbed the envelope off the table and the picture of Josh, and I spun and slid, landing next to other Polaroids in front of me. She held the envelope up to my eyes, but I could only look at her and watch as all the color began draining out of her face. With tears welling up in her eyes, she said that she had to call the police because there was no postmark.
Oh, that story is so good. I love this story so much.
Yeah, this is some good shit. I am going to let, I believe it's your turn, Gigi? Is it your turn?
It is.
Alright, amazing. I am going to hit continue to the next part, and I'm going to take a restroom break.
Gotcha. This is the third part of this story, Boxes. For those of you who have read my other stories and asked if there was more and received cryptic answers from me, I want to apologize for being dishonest. I said several times in the comments that nothing really happened after footsteps, but that wasn't true. The events of the following story were not locked away in the recesses of my mind. I've always remembered them. It wasn't until I remembered balloons and spoke with my mother about the following events that I realized how intertwined the story was with everything else. But I originally hadn't really planned on sharing this anyway. My desire to withhold this memory was due mostly to the fact that I don't think I showed good judgment in it. I also wanted consent from another person to tell it so as not to misrepresent what transpired. I didn't expect there to be a lot of interest in my other stories, so I never thought I'd really get pressed for more details, and I would have been happy to keep this to myself for the rest of my life. I haven't been able to reach the other party, but I would feel disingenuous withholding the story from those who wanted more information. Now that I've spoken with my mother, and another connecting line has been drawn. What follows is as accurate a recollection as I could manage. I apologize for the length. I spent the summer before my first year of elementary school learning how to climb trees. There was one particular pine tree right outside my house that seemed almost designed for me. It had branches that were so low I could easily grab them without a boost. And for the first couple days after I first learned how to pull myself up, I would just sit on the lowest branch, dangling my feet. The tree was outside our back fence and was easily visible from the kitchen window, which was just above the sink. Before too long, my mother and I developed a routine where I would go play on the tree while she washed the dishes because she could easily see me while she did other things. As the summer passed, my abilities grew, and before too long, I was climbing fairly high. As the tree got taller, its branches not only got thinner but more widely spaced, and so I eventually reached a point where I couldn't actually climb any higher. And so the game had to change. I began to concentrate on speed, and in the end, I could reach my highest branch in 25 seconds. I got too confident, and one afternoon I tried to step from a branch before I had firmly grasped the next one. I fell about 20 feet and broke my arm really badly in 2 places. My mom was running toward me yelling, and I remember her sounding like she was underwater. I don't remember what she said, but I do remember being surprised by just how white my bone was. I was going to start kindergarten with a cast, and my mom wouldn't even let any friends sign it. My mom must have felt terrible because the day before I started school, she brought home a kitten. He was just a baby and was striped with tan and white. As soon as she put him down, he crawled into an empty case of soda that was sitting on the floor. I named him Boxes. Boxes was only an outdoor cat when he escaped. My mom and I had him declawed so he wouldn't destroy the furniture, so as a result, we did our best to keep him inside. He'd get out every now and then, and we'd find him somewhere in the backyard chasing some kind of bug or lizard, though he could hardly ever catch one because he had no front claws. He was pretty evasive, but we'd always catch him and carry him back inside. He'd scramble to look back over my shoulder. I told my mom that it was because he was planning a strategy for the next time. Once inside, we'd give him some tuna fish, and he came to learn what the sound of the can opener might signal. He'd come running whenever he heard it. This conditioning came in handy later because toward the end of our time at that house, Boxes would get out much more often and would run under the house into the crawl space where neither of us wanted to follow because it was cramped and probably crawling with bugs and rodents. Ingeniously, my mom thought to hook the can opener to an extension cord out back and run it right outside the hole that Boxes had gone through. Eventually, he would emerge with his loud mews, looking excited by the sound and then horrified at how we could run such a cruel ruse on him. A can opener with no tuna made no sense to Boxes. The last time he escaped under the house was actually our last day in it. My mom had put the house on the market and we'd begun packing our things. We didn't have much and we stretched the packing out a while. And though I had already packed up all my clothes at my mom's request, my mom could tell I was really sad about moving and wanted the transition to be smooth for me, and I guess she thought that having my clothes in a box would reinforce the idea that we were moving, but things wouldn't change that much. When Boxes got out as we were loading some things into the moving van, my mom cursed because she had already packed the can opener and wasn't sure where it was. I pretended to go look for it so I wouldn't have to go look under the house, and my mom, probably completely aware of my little scam, moved one of the panels and crawled in. She came out with Boxes pretty quickly and seemed pretty unnerved, which made me feel even better about getting out of it. My mom had made some phone calls while I packed a little more, and then she came into my room and told me that she had spoken to the realtor and we were going to start moving into the other house that day. She said it like it was excellent news, but I had thought we had more time in the house. She originally said until we weren't moving until the end of the next week, and it was only Tuesday. What's more, we weren't completely finished packing. But my mom said sometimes it was just easier to replace things than pack them and haul them all over the city. I didn't even get to grab the rest of my boxed clothes. I asked if I could call Josh to say bye, but she said that we could just call him from our new house. We left in the moving van. I managed to stay in touch with Josh for years, which is surprising since we no longer went to the same school. Our parents weren't close friends, but they knew that we were, and so they would accommodate our desire to see one another by driving us back and forth for sleepovers, sometimes every weekend. For Christmas one year, our parents even pooled their money and got us some really nice walkie-talkies that were advertised to work across a range that extended past the distance between our houses. They also had batteries that could last for days if the walkie-talkie was on but not used. They would only occasionally work well enough that we could talk across the city, but when we stayed over, we used them around the house, talking in mock radio speak that we had taken from movies, and they worked great for that. Thanks to our parents, we were still friends when we were 10. One weekend, I was staying over at Josh's, and my mom called me to say goodnight. She was still pretty watchful, even when she couldn't actually watch me, but I had gotten so used to it that I didn't even notice it, even if Josh did. She sounded upset. Boxes was missing. This must have been a Saturday night because I had spent the night at Josh's the previous night and was going to go home the next day because we had school on Monday. Boxes had been missing since Friday afternoon. I gathered that she had not seen him since returning home after dropping me off. She must have decided to tell me that he was missing because if he didn't come home before I did, then I would be devastated at not only his absence, but how she could have kept it from me. She told me not to worry. He'll come back. He always does. But Boxes didn't come back. 3 weekends later, I stayed at Josh's again. I was still upset about Boxes, but my mom told me that there had been many times when Pet had disappeared from home for months or even weeks, only to return on their own. She said they would always knew where home was and would always try to get back. I was explaining this to Josh when a thought hit me so hard that I interrupted my own sentence to say it aloud. What if Boxes thought of the wrong home? Josh was confused. What? He lives with you. He knows where his home is. But he grew up somewhere else, Josh. He was raised in my old house, a couple of neighborhoods away. Maybe he still thinks of that place as home, like I do. Hold on just a second. Hi, read. Let me find the next place. All right, sorry about that. Oh, I get it. Well, that'd be great. We can tell my dad tomorrow and he'll take us over there so we can look. No, we won't, man. My mom said that we couldn't ever go back to that place because the new owners wouldn't want to be bothered. She said that she told your mom and dad the same thing. Josh persisted. Okay, then we'll just go out exploring tomorrow and make our way to your old house. No. If we get spotted, your dad will find out, and then so will my mom. We have to go there ourselves, and we have to go there tonight. It didn't take that much convincing to get Josh on board, since he was usually the one to come up with ideas like this. But we had never snuck out of his house before. It actually turned out to be incredibly easy. The window in his room opened to the backyard, and he had a latched wooden fence that wasn't locked. After those 2 minor hurdles, we slipped off into the night, flashlight and walkie-talkies in hand. There were 2 ways to get from Josh's house to my old house. We could walk on the street and make all the turns, or go through the woods, which would take about half the time. It would have taken about 2 hours to walk there taking the street, but I suggested we go that way anyway. I told them that it was because I didn't want to get lost. Josh refused and said that if we were seen, they might recognize him and tell his dad. He threatened to go home if we didn't take the shortcut, and I accepted because I didn't want to go by myself. Josh didn't know about the last time I walked through these woods at night. The woods were much less creepy with a friend and a flashlight, and we were making pretty good time. I wasn't entirely sure where we were, but Josh seemed confident enough that it bolstered my morale. We passed through a particularly thick patch of tangled trees when the strap on my walkie-talkie got caught on a branch. Josh had the flashlight, and so I was struggling to get the walkie free when I heard Josh say, "Hey man, do you want to go for a swim?" I look over to where he was shining the flashlight through my closed eyes as I did, because I now knew where we were. He was pointing at the pool float. This was where I had woken up in these woods all those years ago. I felt a lump in my throat and the sting of fresh tears in my eyes as I continued to struggle with the walkie. Frustrated, I yanked on it hard enough to break it free, and I turned and walked to Josh, who had partially laid down on the pool float in a mock sunbathing pose. As I walked toward him, I stumbled and nearly fell into a large hole that was sitting in the middle of this small clearing, but regained my balance and stopped right at its edge. It was deep. I was surprised by the size of the hole, but more surprised by the fact that I didn't remember it. I realized it must not have been there that night because it was in the same spot where I had awoken. I put it out of my mind and turned to Josh. Quit messing around, man. You saw I was stuck over there and you were just laying around joking around on this float. I punctuated the sentence with a kick to an exposed part of the float. A screeching rose from it. Josh's smile inverted. He suddenly looked terrified and was struggling to get off the float, but couldn't in a quick manner due to the awkward way he had been laying on it. Each time he would fall back on the float, the screeching would intensify. I wanted to help Josh, but I couldn't move myself any closer. My legs wouldn't cooperate. I hated these woods. I picked up the flashlight that he had thrown in his thrashing and shined in on the float, not knowing what to expect. Finally, Josh got off the float and rushed next to me and looking at where I was shining the light. Suddenly it was there. It was a rat. I started laughing nervously, and we both watched the rat run into the woods, taking Screeches with it. Josh lightly punched me in the arm, the smile slowly returning to his face, and we continued walking. We quickened our pace and made it out of the woods faster than we thought we would, and we found ourselves back in my old neighborhood. The last time I had rounded the bend ahead, I had seen my house fully illuminated, and all the memories of what transpired came flooding back. I felt a skipping in my heart as we were finally turning the corner and about to face the full view of my house, remembering last time how incandescent it was. But this time all the lights were off. From a distance, I could see my old climbing tree, and my mind traced the steps of causality backward. I realized that I wouldn't back here in this night if that tree hadn't grown, and I was briefly in awe of how all events were like that. As we got closer, I could see that the lawn looked terrible. I couldn't even guess when it had last been mowed. One of the shutters had partially broken loose and was rocking back and forth in the breeze, and over all the house it just looked dirty. I was sad to see my old home in such a state of disrepair. Why would my mom care if we bothered the new owners if they cared so little about where they lived? And then I realized there were no new owners. The house was abandoned, though it looked simply forsaken. Why would my mom lie to me about our house having new people in it? But I thought that this was actually a good thing. It would be easier to look around for boxes if we didn't have to be worry about being spotted by the new family. This would make it much quicker. Josh interrupted my thoughts as we walked through the gate and up to the house itself. Your old house sucks, dude, Josh yelled as quietly as he could. Shut up, Josh. It's still nicer than your house. Hey, man. Okay. I think boxes is probably under the house. One of us has to go under and look, but the other should stay next to the opening in case he comes running out. Are you serious? There's no way I'm going under there. It's your cat, man. You do it. Look, I'll game you for it, unless you're too scared, I said, holding my fist over my upturned palm. Fine, but we go on shoot, not on 3. It's rock, paper, scissors, shoot, not 1, 2, 3. I know how to play the game, Josh. You're the one who always messes up, and it's 2 out of 3. I lost. I wiggled loose the panel that my mom would always move when she had to crawl under here for boxes. She only had to do it a couple of times since the can opener trick usually worked, but when she had to do it, she hated it, especially that last time. And as I looked into the darkness of the crawl space, I had a greater appreciation for why. Before we moved, she said that it was actually better that boxes ran under here, despite how hard it could be to get him out. It was less dangerous than him jumping over the fence and running around the neighborhood. All of that was true, but I was still dreading doing this. I grabbed the flashlight and the walkie and began to crawl in. A powerful smell overtook me. It smelled like death. I turned on my walkie. Josh, are you there? This is Macho Man. Come back. Josh, cut it out. There's something wrong down here. What do you mean? It stinks. It smells like something died. Is it boxes? I really hope not. I set down the walkie and moved the flashlight around as I crawled forward. Looking through the hole from the outside, you could see all the way back with the right lighting, but you had to be inside to see around the support blocks that held the house up. I'd say that there was about 40% of the area that you couldn't see unless you were actually in the crawl space, but even inside, I discovered that I could only see directly where the flashlight was pointing. I realized that this would make scouting around the place much more difficult. As I moved forward, the smell intensified. The fear was growing in me that boxes had come here and something had happened to him. I shined my flashlight around but couldn't see much of anything. I wrapped my fingers around a support block to pull myself forward, and as I did that, I felt something that made my hand recoil. Fur. My heart sank and I prepared emotionally for what I was about to see. I crawled slowly so I could prolong what I knew was coming and inched my eyes and the flashlight past the block to see what was on the other side. I staggered back in horror. Jesus Christ! Escaped my trembling mouth. It was a hideous and twisted creature, badly decomposed. Its skin had rotted away on its face, so the teeth appeared to be enormous, and the smell was unbearable. What is it? Are you okay? Is it boxes? I reached for the walkie. No, it's not boxes. Well, what the hell is it then? I don't know. I shined the light on it again and looked at it with less fear in my vision. I chuckled. It's a raccoon. Well, keep looking. I'm going to go into the house to see if you might have made it in there somehow. What? No, Josh, don't go in there. What if Boxes is down here and runs out? He can't. I put the board back. I looked and saw that he was telling the truth. Why'd you do that? Don't worry, man. You can move it easy. This makes more sense. If Boxes ran out and I missed him, then he'd be gone. If he's down there, then grab him tight and I'll come move the board. And if he's not, then you can move it yourself while I look in the house. Some of his points were good, and I doubted he'd be able to get in anyway. Okay, but be careful and don't touch anything. There's a bunch of my old clothes still in boxes in my room. You can look in there to see if he crawled in one. And make sure to bring your walkie. Roger that, good buddy. I realized that it would have been pitch black in there. The power would have been turned off since no one was paying the bill. With any luck, you'd be able to see from the street lights, and that might cast some light inside. Otherwise, I'm not sure what he'd do. Before too long, I heard footsteps right over my head and felt old dirt raining down on me. Josh, is that you? Shh. Breaker, this is Macho Man coming back for the Big Tango Foxtrot. The Eagle has landed. What's your 20, Princess Jasmine? Over. Asshole. Macho Man, my 20 is in your bathroom looking at your stash of magazines. Looks like you got a thing for dudes' butts. What's the report on that? Over. I could hear him laughing without the walkie, and I started laughing too. I heard the footsteps fade away. He was on his way to my room. Man, it's dark in here. Are you sure you had boxes of clothes? I don't see any. Yeah, there should be a couple of boxes in front of the closet. There aren't any boxes in here. Let me check to see if you maybe put them in your closet before you left. I started thinking that maybe my mom had come back and gotten the clothes and just given them away because I had outgrown a lot of them, but remembered leaving the boxes there. I didn't even have time to close the last one up before we left. While I was waiting for Josh to tell me what he found, I kicked out my leg, which had started falling asleep because of the position I was in, and it hit something. I looked back and saw something really strange. It was a blanket, and all around it there were bowls. I crawled a little closer to it. The blanket smelled moldy, and most of the bowls were empty, but one had something that I still recognized in it. Cat food. It was a different kind than we gave to boxes, but I suddenly understood. My mom had set up a little place for boxes to encourage him to come here instead of running around the neighborhood. That made a lot of sense, and it seemed even more likely that boxes would have come back to this place. That's so cool, Mom, I thought. I found your clothes. Oh, cool. Where were the boxes? Like I said, there are no boxes. Your clothes are in your closet. They're all hanging up. I felt a chill. This was impossible. I had packed all my clothes. Even though we weren't supposed to move for another 2 weeks when we left, I remember packing them and thinking that it was stupid for me to have to get clothes out of the box and put them back in. I had packed them, but someone had hung them back up. Why, though? Josh needed to get out of there. That can't be right, Josh. They're supposed to be in boxes. Stop messing around and just come back outside. No joke, man. I'm looking at them. Maybe you just thought you left them. Wow, you sure like to look at yourself a lot, don't you? What? What do you mean? Your walls, man. Your walls are covered in Polaroids of yourself. There are hundreds of them. What'd you do? Hire someone to... Silence. I checked my walkie to see if I had switched it off somehow. It was fine. I could hear footsteps, but couldn't tell exactly where Josh was going. I waited for Josh to finish his sentence, thinking that his finger had just slipped off the button, but he didn't continue. He seemed to be stomping around the house now. I was about to radio him when he came back. There's someone in the house. His voice was hushed and broken. I could hear he was on the verge of tears. I wanted to respond, but how loud was his walkie turned up? What if the other person heard it? I said nothing and just waited and listened. What I heard were footsteps, heavy, dragging footsteps, and then a loud thud. Oh God, Josh. He had been found, I was sure of it. This person had found him and was hurting him. I broke out in tears. He was my only friend next to boxes, and then I realized, what if Josh told him I was under here? What could I possibly do? And as I struggled to compose myself, I thankfully heard Josh's voice through the walkie. He's got something, man. It's a big bag. And he just threw it on the floor. And, oh God, man, the bag, I think it just moved. I was paralyzed. I wanted to run home. I wanted to save Josh. I wanted to go for help. I wanted so many things, but I just lay there frozen. As I lay unable to move, my eyes focused on the corner of the house that was right under my room. I moved my flashlight. My breath hitched at what I saw. Dozens of them, all dead. They lay in piles all around the perimeter of the crawl space. Could boxes be among these corpses? Was this what the cat food was for? Seeing this broke my shock as I knew I had to get out of there, and I scrambled to the board. I pushed on it, but it would not budge. I couldn't move it because it was wedged in there, and I couldn't get my fingers around it since the edges were outside. I was trapped. God damn you, Josh, I whispered to myself. I could feel thunderous footsteps above me. The house was shaking. I heard Josh scream, and it was matched by another scream that wasn't full of fear. As I continued pushing, I felt the board move, but I knew it wasn't me who was moving it. I could hear footsteps above me and in front of me, and shouting and screaming, filling brief silences between the footsteps. I moved back and held my walkie, ready to try to defend myself, and the board was thrown to the side, and an arm shot in and grabbed for me. Let's go, man, now. It was Josh. Thank God. I scrambled out of the opening, holding a flashlight and the walkie. When we got to the fence, we both jumped it, but Josh's walkie fell. He reached for it, and I told him to forget it. We had to move. Behind us, I could hear yelling, but they weren't words, only sounds. And we perhaps foolishly ran for the woods to get back to Josh's quicker and maybe somewhat harder to follow. The whole way through the woods, Josh kept yelling, "My picture. He took my picture." But I knew the man already had Josh's picture from all those years ago at the ditch. I suppose Josh still thought those mechanical sounds were from a robot. We made it back to Josh's house and back into his room before his parents woke up. I asked him about the big bag and if it really moved, and he said he couldn't be sure. He kept apologizing about dropping the walkie at the house, but obviously it wasn't that big of a deal. We didn't go to sleep and sat peering out of the window waiting for him. I went home later that day as it was about 3 a.m. already. I told my mom the basics of this story a couple of days ago. She broke down and was furious about the danger I put myself in. I asked her why she made all those things up about bothering the new owners to stop me from going. Why did she think the house was so dangerous? She became irate and hysterical, but she answered my question. She grabbed my hand and squeezed it harder. And then I thought her capable and locked her eyes to mine, whispering as if she was afraid of being overheard. Because I never put any fucking blankets or bowls under the house for boxes, you weren't the only one to find them. I felt dizzy. I understood so much now. I understood why she had looked so uneasy after she brought boxes out from under the house on our last day there. She found more than spiders or a rat's nest on that day. I understood why we left almost 2 weeks early. I understood why she tried to stop me from going back. She knew. She knew he had made his home under ours, and she kept it from me. I left without saying another word and didn't finish the story for her, but I wanted to finish here for you. I got home from Josh's that day, threw my stuff on the floor, and it scattered everywhere. I didn't care. I just wanted to sleep. I woke up around 9 p.m. to the sound of boxes meowing. My heart leapt. He had finally come home. I was a little sick about the fact that if I had just waited a day, none of the previous night's events would have happened and I'd have boxes anyway, but that didn't matter. He was back. I got off my bed and called for him, looking around to catch a glint of light off his eyes. The crying continued and I followed it. It was coming from under the bed. I laughed for a little bit, thinking I just crawled under a house looking for him and how this was so much better. His meows were being muffled by a shirt, so I flung it aside and smiled, yelling, "Welcome home, boxes." His cries were coming from my walkie-talkie. Boxes never came home. End of part 3.
Right, so the next one is maps, and I think I have to read that one. Or is that first game?
Yes.
Alright, then I'll read it. Great, maps. There was a comment in the last post that made me remember an event from my childhood that I always took as odd, but never considered it to be related to any of these stories. I now know that it is. It's funny how memories work. The details might all be present in your mind, though scattered and disarrayed, and then a single thing can stitch them back together almost instantly. I never thought of these events much because I was focused on the wrong details. I went back to my mom's house and went through my old childhood schoolwork looking for something that I think is important. I couldn't find it, but I'll keep looking. Again, sorry for the length. Most old cities and the neighborhoods in them weren't planned with the thought that the population would begin to grow exponentially and it would have to be accommodated. The layout of the roads is generally originally in response to geographical restrictions and the necessity of connecting points of economic importance. Once the connecting roads are established, new businesses and roads are positioned strategically along the existing skeleton, and then eventually the paths are carved into the earth are immortalized in asphalt, leaving room for only minor modifications, additions, and alterations, but never a dramatic change. My childhood neighborhood must have been old then. If straight lines move as the crow flies, then my neighborhood must have been built based on the travels of a snake. The first houses built must have been placed around the lake, and then gradually the inhabitable area increased as new extensions were built off the original path. But these new extensions all ended abruptly at one point or another. There was only one entrance exit for the entire neighborhood. Many of these extensions were limited by a tributary, which both fed and drank from the lake and passed right by what I came to call, and what I've called in these stories, the ditch. Many of the original homes had enormous yards. Some of those original plots have been divided, leaving properties with smaller and smaller boundaries. An aerial view of my neighborhood would give you the impression that an enormous squid had once died in the woods, and some adventuring entrepreneur found the corpse and paved the roads over its tentacles only to withdraw his involvement and leave time, greed, and desperation to divide up the land amongst prospective homeowners like an embarrassing attempt at the golden ratio. From the porch, you could see the old houses that surrounded the lake, but the house of Mrs. Maggie was my favorite. She was, as best as I can remember, around 80 years old, but despite that, she was one of the friendliest people I have ever met. She had a head of loose, white curls, and always wore light dresses for a pattern. She would talk to me and Josh from her back porch when we were swimming in the lake, and she would always invite us in for snacks. She said that she was lonely because her husband Tom was always away on business, but Josh and I would always decline her invitation because, as nice as Mrs. Maggie was, there was something a bit odd about her. Every now and then we would swim, as we would swim away, she would say, "Chris and Josh, you're always welcome here anytime," and we would hear her still yelling that when we were walking back into my house. Mrs. Maggie, like many of the older homeowners, had a sprinkler system that was on a timer, though at some point over the years her timer must have broken because the sprinklers would come on at various points during the day and even at night all the year. While it never got cold enough to snow very much, several times this winter I would go outside in the morning to see Mrs. Maggie's yard transformed into a surreal Arctic paradise by the frozen water. Every other yard stood sterilized and dry by the biting frost of winter's cold, but right there in the middle of the bleak reminder of the savagery of the season was an oasis of beautiful ice hanging like stalactites from every branch of every tree and every leaf of every bush. As the sun rose, it reflected off of each piece of ice, splintered into the sun and into a rainbow that would only be viewed briefly before it blinded you. Even as a child, I was struck by how beautiful it was, and often Josh and I would go over there to walk on the iced grass and have sword fights with the icicles. I once asked my mom why she left it on like that. My mom always seemed to search for an explanation before she said, "Well, sweetie, Mrs. Maggie is sick a lot, and sometimes when she gets really sick, she gets confused, and that's why she messes up yours and Josh's names sometimes. She doesn't mean to, but sometimes she just can't remember. She lives in that big house all by herself, so it's okay if you talk to her when you swim in the lake. When she invites you in, you should keep saying no. Be polite, her feelings won't get hurt. But she'll be less lonely when her husband comes home, though, right? How long will he be away on business? It seems like he's always away." My mom seemed to struggle as I could see she'd become very upset. Finally, she answered, "Honey, Tom's not going to come home. Tom's in heaven. He died years and years ago, but Mrs. Maggie doesn't remember. She gets confused and forgets, but Tom's not ever coming home. If someone moved back in with her, she might think that it was Tom, but he's gone, sweetie." I would have only been around 5 or 6 when she told me that, and while I didn't understand it completely, I was still profoundly sad for Miss Maggie. I now know that Miss Maggie had Alzheimer's, and she and her husband Tom had 2 sons, Chris and John. The two had worked out a payment plan with the utility companies and paid for Mrs. Maggie's water and electricity, but they would never visit her. I don't know if something happened between them, or if it was the illness, or if they just lived too far away, but they never came around. I have no idea what they looked like, but there were times when Mrs. Maggie must have thought Josh and I looked the way they did when they were children. Maybe she saw some part of her mind desperately wanted to some part that her mind desperately so wanted to see, ignoring the images transmitted down her optic nerve and just for a little while showing her what used to be. I realize only now how lonely she must have been. Hang on, water break. During the summer after kindergarten, before the events of balloons, Josh and I had taken to exploring the woods near my house, as well as the tributary of the lake. We knew that the woods between our houses were connected, and we thought it would be neat if the lake near my house was somehow connected to the creek around his, so we resolved ourselves to find out. We were going to make maps. The plan was to make 2 separate maps and then combine them. We would make one map exploring the area around the creek near his house, and then make another following the outflow from my lake. Originally, we were. Sorry. Originally, we were going to make one map. We realized that it wasn't possible since I had started drawing the map of my area so huge that the roof of his house wouldn't have been to scale. So we kept the map from the lake at my house and the map from the creek at his house, and we would add to each when we stayed the night with each other. For the first couple weeks it went really well. We would walk through the woods along the water and pause every couple minutes to add to the map. It seemed like the 2 maps would come together any day. We had no equipment needed for the job, not even a compass, but we tried to make do. We had the idea to impale the earth with a stick, and when we had reached the end of the adventure, so that we would, if we came upon the stick from the other direction the next weekend, we would know we had joined the maps. We might have been the world's worst cartographers. Eventually, however, the woods became too thick near the water coming from the lake, and we were unable to proceed further. We lost interest in the whole project for a bit and reduced our exploration significantly, though not completely, when we started selling snow cones. After I showed my mom all the pictures I had taken home from school and she took away my snow cone machine, our interest in the maps revitalized. We had come up with another plan, although I didn't understand why my mom had placed what I considered to be extremely severe restrictions on what I could do and where I could go. And I had to check in frequently if I went outside to play with Josh. This meant that we couldn't stay in the woods for hours to continue to look for a new path. We thought that we could just swim when we got to the cutoff in the woods, but that clearly wouldn't work since the map would get wet. We tried going faster when we were coming from Josh's house, but we eventually ran into the same problem. Then we had a brilliant idea. We'd build a raft. Due to the construction in the neighborhood, there was a large amount of scrap building material that the companies would set in the ditch to keep it out of the road and off site since they no longer needed it for building. We originally conceived a formidable ship complete with a mast and an anchor, but this quickly diminished into something more manageable. We set aside the wood and took several large pieces of styrofoam that were backed with foam board and tied them together with rope and kite string. We launched our vessel into a little down the water from Mrs. Maggie and waved farewell to her as she motioned us to come back her way, but there was no stopping us. The raft worked very well, and in a while we both behaved and spoke as if the functionality of the raft was a given. I know I was at least a little that I was surprised. We each had a fairly long tree branch to use as a paddle, but we found it easier to simply push against the land under the water and then actually use them as intended. When the water became too deep, we'd simply lie on our stomachs and use our hands to paddle the water, which still worked, albeit less well. The first time we had to resort to the method of propulsion, I remember thinking that from far above it must have looked like a colossally fat man with tiny arms was out for a swim. It actually took us several trips to get the raft to the impassable patch of woods that marked the farthest we had made it after we had come up with the idea of marking it the ground with a stick. We had taken to running through the woods until we got up to a stick, and as carefully and precisely as we knew how, charting our course. This meant that the impasse was actually quite a bit away, so to sail from around my house all the way to the blockade in the woods was taking longer than expected. We'd sail for a bit and then dock the raft. Next time we'd run through the woods to the raft to go a little farther. Sorry, hold on. Do you mean call it here after this chapter or in the middle of it, Gigi?
Oh shit. Well, I'm fine with calling it, like, here, even though it's on a cliffhanger. I just got back from fighting for my life on the restroom, and I need to take a shower. Because, like, I smell awful because my roommate turned up the house heat to 75 degrees, and my window was closed, and I'm still sweating. So I am overheating, so to prevent heat stroke, I need to go take a fucking shower.
That sounds awful. Okay, good luck with that. Yeah, no, we can, after this chapter. Yeah, Gigi here. Why don't you take over this one? We'll finish it off, and then we'll do the rest of Pen Pal, on the next Ladies' Night, which we're gonna try to make closer to this one or something. I don't know.
I wasn't, like, told how many chapters there were in Pen Pal, so, like, I apologize.
I'll tell you real quick. Pen Pal has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's got 8 chapters, and we're on, like, so we've got, like, 3 left.
Oh, sweet mother of God. Yeah, we've been at it for 2 hours and almost 30 minutes with this stream. I think we can continue Pen Pal tomorrow if you're free, Gigi.
I'm free. I could continue it for sure.
Alright. Like, I'm just gonna wait on a text from Gigi. And the restroom is calling me again. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Hey, Emily.
Yes.
All right, where were you? And I can take over finishing this chapter, and then we can totally do some more pen pal tomorrow. That'd be awesome.
Alright. I think we continued this well into first grade. Do you see that part? Like, I stopped right there.
Okay, yes. I'll start from there. We continued this well into first grade. Josh and I were assigned to different groups that year, so we didn't really see one another during the school day. Our parents were more willing to let us hang out all weekend each week. What's more, Josh's dad had taken on a lengthy construction job that required him to work over weekends, and his mother was on call, so this meant that Josh would stay at my house most every weekend for weeks on end. We should have been making excellent progress, but when we finally made it to the impasse and had the opportunity to explore past it, we couldn't find a place to dock the raft. The woods were simply too thick, and the water had eroded the land to the point that there was nearly a 2-foot rise of earth over the tributary, which exposed the twisting and damp roots of the trees above. We'd have to turn back every time and leave the raft at the same thick of trees that had prompted us to build it in the first place. Even worse, winter had arrived, so we couldn't justify leaving the house in our swimsuits. We were getting nowhere. We had always had to come home before we could gain much ground. On Saturday around 7 p.m., Josh and I were playing when one of my mom's coworkers knocked on our door. Her name was Samantha, and I remember her well now because I would propose to her a couple of years later when I was visiting my mom at work. My mom said that she had to go to work to fix a problem that had arisen and that she'd be back in about 2 hours. Her car was being repaired, so she'd have to ride with Samantha, but I gathered that the problem was Samantha's fault, and discussing it in the car was why it would only take 2 hours. She said that under no circumstances were we to leave the house or open the door for anyone, and she was in the middle of explaining that she would call every hour when she got there to check in, but ended that statement prematurely when she remembered that our phone had been turned off for delinquent payments. This was why Samantha had just come by unannounced. She looked at me dead in the eye as she was closing the door and said, "Stay put." This was our chance. We watched her drive down the serpentine road towards the exit, and as soon as the car rounded the last visible bend, we ran back to my room. I dumped my backpack out while Josh grabbed the map. "Hey, do you have a flashlight?" Josh chimed. "No, but we'll be back way before dark." I was thinking just in case we should have one. My mom has one, but I don't know where she keeps it. Wait, I ran into my closet and pulled a box down from the top shelf. "You have a flashlight in there?" Josh asked. "Not exactly." I opened the box and revealed 3 Roman candles that I had taken from a pile that my mother had amassed for the 4th of July that past summer, along with a lighter that I had managed to take from her some months before. This would ensure that we at least got some light if we needed it. This was a little bit before I'd been given an opportunity to be afraid of the woods at night, so it wasn't fear that motivated our search for a light source, only practicality. We threw it all in the backpack and bolted out the back door, making sure to close it so boxes wouldn't get out. We had 1 hour and 50 minutes. We ran through the woods as fast as we could and made it to the raft in about 15 minutes. We had our bathing suits on under our clothes, so we stripped off our shirts and shorts and left them in 2 separate piles about 4 feet from the edge of the water. We untied the raft from the tree, grabbed our branch paddles, and cast off. We tried to move rapidly to reach a point beyond the contents of our ever-expanding map, as we didn't have time to waste seeing old sights. We knew that we were slower in the raft than on land, and that we would be in the raft for quite a while after the cutoff, since the woods were too thick to walk through and there wasn't a place to dock. This meant we'd have to ride the raft back to the original docking site, even if we found a new place to dock it further ahead. After we passed the last charted part of our map, the water began to get really deep, And eventually we could no longer touch the bottom with our tree branches, so we lay on our stomachs and paddled with our hands. It was getting darker, and as a result, it was becoming harder to distinguish the trees from one another, and we were both becoming slightly unnerved. In the interest of making good time, we were paddling fast with our arms, but this caused a lot of noise as our hands repeatedly confronted and then broke through the water's surface tension. During these periods, we could both hear the crunching of dead leaves and the snapping of fallen sticks in the woods to our right. As we would slow our pace and quiet our actions, the rustling in the woods would cease, and we began to wonder if it was ever there at all. We didn't know what kinds of animals resided this far into the woods, but we did know that we didn't wish to find out. As Josh amended the map that I was illuminating with the lighter, we were suddenly confronted with the fact that the sounds were not imagined. Rapidly and rhythmically, we heard crunch, snap, crunch. It seemed to be moving slightly away from us, pushing through the woods just beyond our map. It had become too dark to see, and we had misjudged how long the sun would linger. Nervously, I called out, "Hello?" There was a brief moment of breathless tension as we lay static in the water. This silence was suddenly broken by laughter. "Hello?" Josh cackled. "So what?" "Hello, Mr. Monster in the Woods. I know you're sneaking around, but maybe you'll answer to my hello." I realized how stupid it was. Whatever animal it was, it wouldn't respond. I hadn't even realized I'd said it until afterwards. But if anything, it was actually there. I obviously wouldn't get a reply. Josh continued, "Hello," in a high falsetto. "Hello," I encountered with as deep a baritone as I could manage. "Hello there, mate. Hello, beep boop. Hello." We continued mocking each other, and we were in the process of turning the raft around to head back when we heard, "Hello." It was whispered and forced as if it were powered by the last pair of breath and deflating lungs, but it didn't sound sickly. It had come from a spot just off the map, which now sat behind us since we had turned the raft around. I slowly shifted on the raft and faced the direction of the sound as I fumbled with the Roman candle. I wanted to see. "What are you doing?" Josh hissed, but I had already lit it. As the sparking fuse sunk into the wrapper, I held it towards the sky. I had never actually shot one of these myself and just thought to use it like a flare in the movies. A glowing green orb rocketed out towards the stars and then quickly extinguished. I lowered my arm more toward the horizon. I could remember that there were several colors, but I couldn't remember how many times one of these fired before being depleted. A second ball of red light burst out and fizzled just above the trees, and I saw nothing. "Let's just go, man." Josh pressed as he turned to face the direction back home and began paddling desperately. "Just one more." Lowering my arm directly at the woods in front of me, another red ball of fire was launched from the tube. It traveled straight ahead until it collided with a tree, briefly exploding the light in a much greater diameter. Still nothing. I dropped the firework in the water and watched as one more struggling fireball burst quickly, only to quickly die suffocated by the water. As we began paddling in the direction towards my house, we heard a loud and unconcealed rustling in the woods. The breaking of branches and trampling of fallen leaves overpowered the sound of our splashing. It was running. In our panic, we jostled the raft too violently, and I felt one of the ropes under my chest loosen. "Josh, be careful!" But it was too late. Our raft was breaking. Before too long, it had completely fallen apart. We each held onto a separate piece of styrofoam, but the pieces weren't big enough to keep us completely afloat, and our legs dangled beneath us in the winter water. "Josh, quick!" I yelled as I pointed to the water right next to him. He scrambled, but it was too cold to move quickly, and we both watched as the map just floated away. "I'm cold, man," Josh shuddered dejectedly. "Let's get out of the water." We approached the shore, but each time we attempted to pull ourselves up, we'd hear the frantic rustling thundering towards us from the woods just above. Eventually, we were too cold and weak to even try anymore. Steadily, we kicked our legs and found ourselves nearing the dock site. We toppled off the debris and tried to pull it on land, but Josh's piece slipped away and floated in the direction of the lake. We took off our swimsuits and were desperate to get into dry clothes to shield us from the biting chill of the air. I slid my shorts, but there was something wrong. I turned to Josh. "Where's my shirt, man?" He shrugged and suggested maybe it got knocked into the water and floated into the lake. I told Josh to go back to my house and to say that we were playing hide and seek if my mom was home. I had to try to find my shirt. I ran behind the houses and peered out over the water and scouted along the shoreline. It occurred to me that with any luck, maybe I could find the map too. I was moving pretty fast because I needed to get home, and it was about to give up when my concentration was interrupted by a sound coming from just behind me. Hello. I whipped around. It was Miss Maggie. I'd never seen her at night before, and in this poor light she looked exceedingly frail. The usual warmth that wrapped her manner couldn't seem to have been snuffed out by the chill. I couldn't remember ever seeing her without a smile, and so her face looked strange. Hello, Miss Maggie. Oh, hi, Chris. The warmth and smile had returned to her, even if her memories had not. I couldn't see it was you in the dark there. Jokingly, I asked her if she was going to invite me in for a snack, but she said maybe another time. I was too busy looking for my map and the shirt to really engage her, but she sounded happy, so I didn't feel bad. She said a couple of other things, but I was too distracted to pay attention. I said goodnight and ran down her driveway toward my house. Behind me, I could hear her walking across the frozen yard, but I didn't turn around to wave. I had to get home. I made it home a couple minutes before my mom did, and by the time she came in, Josh and I had already changed clothes and warmed up. We'd gotten away with it, though we'd lost the map. Couldn't find it? Nah, but I saw Miss Maggie. She called me Chris again. I'm telling you, dude. Just be glad you've never seen her at night. We both laughed, and he asked me if she invited me in for a snack, joking that the snacks must be terrible since she couldn't even give them away. I told him that she didn't, and he was surprised, and now that I had time to think about it, so was I. Literally every time we had seen her, she had invited us in for snacks, and here I had, albeit sarcastically, invited myself, and she said no. As Josh talked more about Miss Maggie, I suddenly realized that the lighter might still be in my pocket and that it would be disastrous for my mom to find it. I grabbed the shorts off the floor and patted my pockets. I felt something, but it wasn't the lighter. From my back pocket, I slid out a folded piece of paper and my heart leapt. The map? I thought, but I watched it float away. As I unfolded the paper, my stomach turned as I tried to understand what I was seeing. Drawn on the paper, inside of a large oval, were two stick figures holding hands. One was much bigger than the other, but neither had faces. The paper was torn so that a part of it was missing, and there was a number written near the top right-hand corner. It was either 15 or 16. I nervously handed Josh the paper and asked him if he had put it in my pocket at some point, but he scoffed at the idea and asked why I was so upset. I pointed towards the smaller stick figure and what was written next to it. It was my initials. I shook it off and told Josh the rest of the conversation between Miss Maggie and I. I'd always attributed the odd exchange to her being sick until revisiting these events in my mind all these years later. As I think about it now, the feeling of profound sadness for Miss Maggie returns, but it is augmented by a looming feeling of despair when I think about why she said, maybe another time. I knew what she had said, but I didn't understand what it had meant. I didn't understand what her words had meant weeks later, when I watched men in strange orange suits, biohazard suits, carry what I thought were black bags full of garbage out of her house, or while the whole neighborhood smelled like death to that day. I still didn't understand why they condemned the house and boarded it up a little while before we moved, but I understand now. I understand why her last words to me were so important, even if neither she nor I realized it at the time. Miss Maggie had told me that night that Tom had come home, but I now know who had really moved in, just as I now know why I never saw her body brought out on a stretcher. Those bags weren't filled with garbage. And that's Cutting Pen Pal. First half.
That's fucking good. I'm enjoying that one. That's fucking well written.
I love this story, and I'm absolutely so excited that y'all agreed to do this, even though it's extremely long. So thank you.
I'm back. What I miss?
We're just schmoozing over the story. Story's awesome.
Yeah, from like what I read and what I heard, like between like my breaks, like it is pretty fucking good. I want to listen to the whole thing. I'm excited to hear the rest of the thing. Anyway, you guys.
Oh my god, this is gonna be so crazy.
Any of you want to chill before I hit the button? Because we've been going at it for almost 3 hours now, according to Streamlabs.
GG's Oddity Shop.etsy.com. I make shit. I make weird shit, and it's kind of cool. So give me a hit up there. That's it for me.
Emily?
I don't got nothing to shill.
Alright, well, I'm gonna skip shilling this time because I usually do when I host, and we'll see you guys hopefully tomorrow in order to do the rest of the pen pal. And it's like almost 10 o'clock for me, so I'm gonna shower, make some din din, and I'm gonna go eepy night night.
Yeah, it's about midnight here. I have got to get to fucking sleep. Good luck sleeping after all these fucking stories.
Yeah.
Happy Halloween, everyone.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween, everybody.
Oh my god.
Alright, good night, everybody.